Good morning, good morning, good morning. I am Ryan Ingram, and it is Friday morning, Christmas Eve, and this is the real estate Q&A. So any sort of real estate questions you have, let me go ahead and get set up. You can go ahead and post those questions in the chat, and please keep in mind that I do not really know what I'm talking about. So always seek professional counsel before acting on anything that is discussed, talked about, or implanted in that pretty little head of yours as you're watching this. So one of the first things that I want to go over today is things to consider when partnering in real estate. I get this question a decent amount, especially when people are first starting out and they want to take down deals quicker and advance whatever real estate goals they have because of a couple reasons. The first, I guess, is that you are likely constrained on the capital available to you. And the others are that you are possibly constricted on your workflow bandwidth. So you might not necessarily have the time of day to do all of the things that are necessary to run a real estate company, a real estate investing company. The other thing is likely that you are uh, lacking in some sort of skill set that you perceive to be imperative to having a successful real estate investing business. And I would say that if you're capital constrained, then getting a partnership or going after a partnership is probably one of the more expensive things that you can do. And I say that because let's say you partner with someone and it's a 50-50 partnership. And let's just use for this example and say that they're providing all of the money and you are providing all of the work. Now, I think that is a great way to get started if you have no money and no track record. However, if you have plans of continuing to acquire properties after this, then it's just really expensive money. Because if you can go to a hard money lender or if you can go to a bank and get approved for anything on that front, then giving up 50% equity in perpetuity, which is what the partnership would be, is significantly more expensive than paying, 2 to 4 points, whatever that hard money lender wants. And it's definitely more expensive than anything that the bank is willing to give you, especially right now when interest rates are at a historic low. And if you are constricted on how much time you have to put in to the real estate portfolio, like if you're working a full-time job and you're worried that you don't have enough time to manage the properties, to look after them, or if you don't have the skill set that you think is required to run a real estate investing business, then again, I'm going to emphasize how expensive of a cost that is for you to partner. So if you want to hire out like the management, well, paying 10% of the gross rent is likely going to be significantly cheaper than partnering even 50-50 in perpetuity with someone else. Now, we have several partnerships under our belt, so I definitely understand why you would want to go this route. And I definitely don't think it's the worst of, all possible things that you could do. However, I would really contemplate the cost of what you're doing on the front end. And if it just seems like a good idea and you think you could excel more with that person than without them, I completely understand. But again, just consider the cost because you can likely hire the skill set that you're looking for or the ability or the bandwidth of time to work a lot faster or a lot cheaper than giving away some equity of your company. And as Will and I are getting further along in our real estate investing journey, the tighter and tighter we are holding on to the equity that we have. As I've mentioned previously, the partnerships that we do have, they started all with great intentions. I don't regret any of them, and I wouldn't change any of them. But what has happened, and again, nobody could predict the future, but Will and I have this management company now where we are able to handle the majority of things that come our way. So the people that we partnered with initially, they do very little of the work, which is fine. And if they were to reach out and ask for more things to do, they would truly be getting in the way more than they would be helping, just because we have this larger management company with the appropriate systems in place. However, we're kind of deadlocked into these partnerships because They do not want to buy us out, because then they would have a new list of problems on their hand. They would need to take over the operations. They would need to, do everything associated with running these properties. And they don't want to be bought out because they really appreciate the situation that they're in. So it's just a little bit of a tricky predicament. And it's one that could have been avoided if on the front end, we were so kind of blindsided by the deal at hand that we didn't necessarily contemplate all of the implications of the partnership that we were signing into existence. All we wanted to do was really take down that deal. So we did not plan or think about any potential exit strategies on the back end while we were forming this partnership. And my advice to anyone looking to partner in real estate would be, first, assess the costs, make sure that it's actually of good value to you to partner on this. And then second, properly plan an exit strategy where both parties could still feel like everyone is winning if one person wants out or wants to buy the other out. And figure out what you're going to do and what would be appropriate and acceptable to both people. Let's say if one party wants to buy the other out and the other isn't interested in that. So that's all that I would say should probably go into the forethought of that. And as far as the actual execution side, what I would say is, obviously, you're going to want to have your professional team of CPAs, attorneys, and insurance professionals to make sure that you get the right legal structure, that you're keeping your books appropriately, and that you're properly insured. I think those three things are of utmost importance whenever you initially form that partnership. And then you're just going to want to make sure that you have a great foundation of that. And as far as the attorney and the CPA, getting those two together and figuring out for your specific situations, what legal entity is best. I've seen partners form an LLC. I think that's probably the most common, with an operating agreement that outlines the roles of each individual, the equity, the cash that was needed to be brought to the table in order to bring that entity into existence, how that money could be brought out, at what point that money could be taken out. And I think there's some uncommon things that are included in an operating agreement that we would likely overlook, like the annual meeting, like where you would meet. Some states require that, others don't. And just a few other things that should be outlined. And if you choose to go that LLC route, then you would also want to think through, how are you going to approach the banks? Which banks are you going to approach? And also be sure that you understand that likely when you're first qualifying for these loans, regardless of the legal entity that you choose, they're going to be qualified. Any loan that you ask for is going to be qualified based on your personal credit score, your personal income, work history, and things like that. I've also seen partners take deals down together just in their individual names. So the properties, I'm Ryan Ingram, Will is Will Ingram. So if we were to take down properties in our individual names, all the properties would be deeded to Ryan and Will Ingram. Now, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but that exposes you on a personal level as well, which is why the attorney and the CPA and having this conversation would be a fantastic start to figure out what's best for your particular situation. Let's see what else I have to say about that. I think from the beginning, if you're just starting out and you and your partner are taking down deals together, doing it in your personal name instead of an LLC name may be a little bit easier from a banking perspective, but a lot riskier on both the legal and accounting side. But again, not a professional. You should check out with them. I'm just trying to figure out what I think they would say. I think, especially if we're talking about single family home investing, I think any legal entity apart from an LLC is likely overkill for the amount of properties and cash flow that initial asset will be producing. So my recommendation as far as legal entities go, again, not a CPA or attorney, would be that LLC. I think if you were to do a trust, a land trust, any of those, it would just be kind of excessive. All right. Let's see. I mentioned, I'm not sure. I know I've been, as you know, I've been doing a bunch of experimenting on the YouTube channel with YouTube Shorts. So I've tried to do several like deals in 30 seconds type videos rather than the deals explained videos that I've done that are sometimes pretty lengthy. I just wanted to know what would happen if I put out as quick of a video as I can, attempting to explain a deal and potentially even show before and after photos. So a couple of them did really well. I think one of them got about 10,000 views this past week. A lot of them, have less than 100 views or things that are more similar to the views that I normally get on this channel. But if you're a normal subscriber and you're seeing those videos, let me know. From my research, what YouTube told me is that they would not be pushed to the initial subscribers, but that the shorts are used to, I guess, put you in front of new audiences. So that's how I've been trying to leverage it. But two of those videos that I made were about some deals that we did this past week. So I got a call, I think it was on like Thursday or Friday, and it was about two properties, both seller financed, designed in a manner where there's no money down. One is a land contract. And the reason we're doing a land contract on that one is because it has a current underlying mortgage that has a balloon coming up in a couple of years with a hefty prepayment penalty. So the land contract, I'll take possession of the property. I won't be the legal deed holder of it. However, due to the due on sale and that hefty balloon, that's why we're going the land contract route over just the normal purchase with seller financing with like a promissory note and mortgage route. But I'm pretty excited about those. One of them is rent ready. We've actually gotten permission to go ahead and put it on the market to try to get a renter in that property as soon as we close. We're closing on that next Wednesday, which is the 29th. And then the other needs about $30,000, maybe $40,000 worth of work, but it's a massive 2-story brick. It looks like one of those old Tudor homes. The homes in the area, some of them are like first floor brick, second story like wood and stucco. It's a pretty solid house. But that puts us, we're going to end the year right around 200 properties. So I think technically we'll be at 201, which, for the longest, I was predicting that we end at like 198, 199. So those two properties that came in at the last minute, I'm super thankful for them, very excited about them, and really happy that we were actually able to hit our 200 goal. Ryan Baker, Merry Christmas. Yeah, this is exciting. I'm also super happy that we get to do this live stream on Christmas Eve. This is really fun. Do you know of any liabilities associated with buying mineral rights royalties from county tax auctions? I don't know anything about it. Thanks. I appreciate it. Yeah, mineral rights are not something that I'm familiar with. My in-laws talk about it occasionally just because, oil was found in their area. So mineral rights became a hotter topic. Presumably you're in Texas where I think oil is a big thing. So I don't know. It's not something that I ever have done. And I'm really cautious on thinking about or trying to provide any insight when I don't know stuff. Thoughts on buying with owner financing? I like doing it. I think whenever you have the opportunity to do it, you probably should. I think that it's a very easy way to take ownership of properties by circumventing the banks, because the two biggest headaches that you're going to have as a real estate investor are going to be the contractors actually getting the work done, and then the banks, the financing piece on the backside. I mean, banks have, rightfully so, they want to limit their risk. They want to make sure that they're making safe investments, and because of that, they're probably going to be overly conservative. And at the beginning, especially, how conservative the banks want to be are going to limit the amount of properties that you're able to purchase pretty good. So I would say, especially when you're starting out, seller financing is a fantastic way to go. Looking back on how we built our portfolio, um, of the first 8 properties that we purchased, the first was in cash. The second was in just a traditional financed property. And I can't remember, I'm getting a little fuzzy on which came third and which came fourth. But one of them was owner financed, and the other was also traditionally financed. And then after the fourth property, or that time that we owner financed the property, that's when I was able to convince my brother to come on board and help me buy as many of these as we possibly could, because the opportunity was just so incredible. But that owner financed property of that fourth one, that was solid. And then of the other first 10, I think since my brother came on board, we did a couple more like traditional loans. And then I think we were able to qualify for a few commercial loans based on our individual income. However, when we got to 8 properties, that is when we were presented with a package of 13 properties seller financed. And that was probably one of the biggest windfalls that we experienced. And that really jump-started our portfolio. Because before, when we had 8 properties and less, my brother and I would have a very painful conversation with each other at the end of every month about like how much money do we need to put in the business to keep it alive another day. And when we purchased that package of 13 properties seller financed, the individual, that added $7,000 of gross revenue to our top line, which helped tremendously. And that's when we started experiencing just like the power of large numbers, or the law of averages, whatever you want to call it, for the first time. So our cash flow became significant enough to where if a maintenance or repair item happened in that month, the cash flow was sufficient to cover it. And then after that, those 21 properties were seasoned, we passed the 2-year mark, with those. And now all of a sudden, because we had 2 years of tax returns, we had those properties and that gross revenue, that we just became, bankable. And now banks would look at our books and qualify us for loans based on the rental properties. So in the beginning, I think owner financing is extraordinarily important. And I think you should educate yourself in that and pursue those opportunities whenever you come across them. It's a tough sell, though, and a lot of people are unfamiliar with it. So I would say, especially as you're starting out and as you're getting started, one of the main roles that you're going to need to play as you're out there looking for deals is becoming an educator, for both private money and for owner finance deals. And you're going to want to educate yourself on how somebody can use their retirement funds as, self-directed funds to lend to you on first position mortgages. And you would also need to become educated enough and a salesman of yourself enough to convince these people to seller finance or hold the financing on properties for you. Merry Christmas. How do you get a seller finance deal with no money down? The closest I've been able to do is $9,000 down. You know, I mean, $9,000 down is plenty. Um, I think in this case, the two of them come together. The $30,000 that's needed for the rehab of that. I mean, the entire time that we will be owning it, presumably we'll be improving the property. So we need to bring $30,000 to the table in order to fix that. It's also coming from another investor who I'm very familiar with and have a long track record with. So that probably skews the perception of it a little bit. This is not somebody. I'm not getting this deal from someone that I don't know or don't have a track record with, or there's any trust issues are going on there. Ral, good morning. Yeah, prop stream. I honestly don't know. I don't know anyone that messes with mineral rights or liabilities. And that's probably one of my favorite things about real estate investing. I say this on the channel pretty frequently. I haven't seen you before, so thanks for being here and welcome. But also, I mean, there's just as many different ways to make money in real estate investing as there are people investing in real estate. I know there are several guys that specifically invest in land, and all they do is like flip land and lots and whatnot. And if I were to be put in a position where I had to get to the bottom of how to invest in mineral rights, those would be the guys that I would start with, and then I would figure out what they have to say. So send me an email. Here's my email, ryan@seekwisdom.us, and I will make an introduction for you to the fella that I know. Him and his brother-in-law, they buy a lot of vacant land together. I'll make an introduction to those guys, and hopefully they could point you in the right direction at least. Prop stream. Thanks, Lewis Porter Jr. Also, I have fixed the camera issue, I think, and I hear my computer's fan going off this entire time. So I'm pretty sure that unlike last week when it blacked out after like every 30 minutes and I had to restart the camera, I do not think that's going to happen today, according to multiple videos that I watched on the YouTube machine. Good morning, Tolu, and Merry Christmas to you as well. This is really exciting. Good morning. And thanks for the comments this week. No way. I appreciate it. Good morning. Join the party late. That's fine. So does seller finance mean you are using the seller's banks? No. Okay, so I see what I said was confusing. So on one of the properties that we're doing seller financing over, we're structuring a land contract. So what a land contract does is it is kind of like Kmart's old layaway system, except you actually get to take the toy with you. So you're making payments. You don't technically own it. It's not. You can record it with the county, but the land contract largely is a document held between two parties giving possession and the ability to operate that property over to you. And after that land contract is satisfied, that's when the actual deed will transfer. So we're doing the land contract because he has an underlying mortgage on that property. So my land contract payment to him is going to be greater than his payment to that underlying mortgage that's on that property. So since he's got that underlying mortgage that has a larger balloon payment, he doesn't want to, like, that prepayment penalty that's large if he pays it off early. He doesn't want to mess with that. So that's why we're doing the land contract. It's pretty simple. He's going to make very little money between, like, on the arbitrage between what he's collecting from me for the land contract versus what he's going to pay for his mortgage. So I guess sort of, in a way, we're using the seller's bank. Any special contract agreement that you had to create for seller financing? Were lawyers involved? So I think technically lawyers are involved in all closings. Most title companies have like an in-house attorney that drafts up documents when necessary. So generally, when you buy a property, an attorney has already prepared the mortgage document that the banks use for like traditional financing. So for seller financing, the only two documents that you need in order to properly record both the loan and the mortgage, regardless of whether it's traditional financing, seller financing, or any other way that you can finance a property, you're going to have the promissory note. The promissory note is generally a simple document. It doesn't have to be long, depending on how much more traditional it gets, the bigger the document gets. So when we sign with a traditional lender, we have hundreds of pages to sign because too many attorneys have been paid to draft that document. And they want to have like a individual paragraph that addresses any given opportunity that may ever happen. The promissory notes that we use to outline the deals that we do with our private investors, it's a one-page document. It outlines how much we're borrowing, the terms. It outlines our late payment if we're ever late. It outlines what is going to happen in the event of default, which is just one paragraph. It outlines when that balloon payment is due, and that's it. Now, that promissory note is always only locally held. So I guess a bank could record it if they want to, but most people don't want to record too much because a lot of the counties charge per page, and there's no real need to record the promissory note. So that promissory note exists between the lender and the borrower. Now, in order for the county to know that that promissory note exists and that that property has a promissory note attached to it, the mortgage deed is what's filed. Now, the mortgage deed, that is what is taken down to, the county and recorded. So the mortgage deed is going to hold the things like the parcel number, the lot number, like the legal description of that address. It's going to have the borrower's information. It's going to have the lender's information. And it's going to say something to the extent of, verifying that a promissory note of, $40,000 exists as outlined in the promissory note of even date or something to that extent. And that is generally also one page, sometimes two, depending on if they ran out of room and the notary has to do their little notary thing on the second page. So I would say for most transactions, seller financed, if it is between two people that are not like experienced lenders that put kind of clout or emphasis on having these massive legal documents that outline every possible scenario, then it's generally going to be 2 to 3 pages that are necessary to record just those 2 to 3. I mean, just that promissory note and mortgage. So that was a long answer for that question, but I think it was thorough. Maybe I'm a little bit biased though, because I'm the one that answered it. A real estate lawyer advised me to consider owning and leasing out from farmland with permanent crops as a strong alternative to rentals. Pistachios made better tenants than people, he said. Thoughts? I would look to see how much farmland he owns, his returns on it, and then I would also look at how many rentals he's ever owned before putting too much emphasis on what he said. I think one of the things that a lot of people don't do enough is kind of discern the information that's given to them and kind of run it through that person's personal accomplishments. If the dude is knocking down, a lot of money per year, doing pistachio farms, then he might be onto something, right? But let's say Ryan Baker's goal is to make $100,000 a year, quote unquote, investing passively, right? So it's in Ryan Baker's best interest to go around and find people and listen to the advice of people that make equal to or greater than $100,000 a year passively, that lives a good lifestyle and has, a good life to show for it. If that person is always stressed and, has a bunch of problems at home and his kids don't respect him, then I wouldn't listen to anything that he had to say, really. If anything, I might compartmentalize what he says professionally if he's got a good professional career under his shoulder. Otherwise, I would kind of dismiss that pretty quickly. So if it's Ryan Baker's goal to make $100,000 a year and you get some advice from a CPA that makes $100,000 a year net from pistachio farms, then I would heavily consider that, especially if he used to make $100,000 a year from rental properties. But if he's just a guy that read this thing somewhere and knows that it's a possibility, but has never actually done it, and is just overall cynical or jaded towards rental properties because he himself doesn't like dealing with people, then I wouldn't put much emphasis on a thing that fella has to say outside of whatever his profession of CPAs are. If you had to choose a new market, how would you go about choosing that? Like, say, out of state or something you're not inherently familiar with. So first off, I would find a very comfortable hotel, and I would find some things to do in that area that greatly interest me. So I would plan kind of a vacation of sorts for myself in that area that I'm interested in, and have some like touristy highlights. Like if there's some good places to eat in the area, if there's some fun things that the city has to see, I would plan that first. So I'd get a fun hotel and put some things to do on my calendar. I would then, that way, I am having fun, I'm in a good mood, and I am having a awesome experience. The second or third thing that I would do is plan out another 2 or 3 days to drive through nearly every street in that city. So when I was in law enforcement, one of the chiefs that I had, I was adamant, and this was a very small department. Right before I left, I went to a really small department, and he wanted the tires of his patrol cars to have touched every single street in that town. And that's what I would try to do on that area. I would then pay really close attention, since I'm already in a good mood because I had fun at that nice hotel and that nice outing that I planned for myself. Since I'm already in a good mood, I would go ahead and I would pay particular attention to how I felt in certain areas. Do I feel safe? Is there much action? Do you see a lot of contracting going on? Like, is there construction? Does the downtown have cranes? Where does it look like people are putting money? If it's really sleepy, if it's one of these Midwest Rust Belt towns and there's like nothing going on as far as the construction goes, then, just make note of that. I know that you've got these people that are like these consulting companies that do all this work for McDonald's. I know you've got these other real estate investors, especially these people on YouTube that will point to all sorts of like population data, job data, all that. I, for one, just, to each their own, I don't like looking at that stuff. I don't like thinking about that stuff. I think that stuff is largely irrelevant, right? I think it's like all lagging indicators. So, if you look at, Silicon Valley before all the tech got started, it wasn't a very impressive place. Then all of a sudden the tech got started. How many years does that information have to lag before you start seeing and before it becomes a popular place to invest? So especially, with the law enforcement background that I have, I prefer to go through areas and actually get a feel for them. Look at the work that's happening in the area, figure out how people are treating their properties. If you've got a street of 20 properties, then just go through and figure out, of those 20 properties, how many have pride of ownership, how many are ran down, how many are boarded up. If you're in Dayton, there are entire streets that are boarded up still. If you're in Detroit, there are entire blocks that are still boarded up, right? So you're going to want to get a feel for that, and then just figure out how it flows with the city. Spend some time downtown during all hours. Figure out, what's the morale of the people that live there? What's the consensus? Is it a growing place? Almost be like one of those news reporter street people, just talking to the random people, getting their thoughts on that area, and pretty much all of that. So, when it comes to where I invest now, I would say the driving factors are the city of Dayton's plans. So what they are acting like they're going to do over the next decade or so, where the money is being put. They've got big plans for downtown Dayton, which you're starting to see. When I first moved here, there were 0 cranes downtown. Now currently we have 2, so that's moving in the right direction. And then I also looked at the areas between downtown and then the suburbs that have a higher socioeconomic or income or whatever you want to say. So now you know that if downtown Dayton becomes a really big attraction, then these the people with the money that are living out here in the suburbs are going to commute to Dayton. If Dayton really is crushing it and things to do in Dayton, then slowly you're going to have people moving from those suburbs back into the city. So a lot of the areas of Dayton are already like built out, but there's one where the main thoroughfare from downtown Dayton to one of these suburbs is still pretty run down. And that is where I do a lot of my investing, because my idea is that at some point you are going to have a connection between the suburbs and downtown Dayton. And slowly people are going to move closer and closer as downtown Dayton continues to up their game. Now, there have been several people since I've started this channel point to Dayton's declining population and come up with reasons that my thinking on that is wrong. So I would say, I'm one of these people that I feel like if you feel like this area is actually going to go, and like for me, I know that for the next 50 years of my life, I'm going to be right here trying and working hard on that area that I'm invested in on Dayton to make it the best of all places that I could possibly help attribute to. So I don't really care what all these statistics or whatnot are saying, because that's what I feel like doing. So I put more emphasis on the things that I can like see, touch, and feel, rather than, all that population stuff. But all that being said, if some of our larger employers started pulling out, I would prepare for a pretty long winter, but I would still be doing the same thing. So hopefully that's helpful. I would spend a lot of time there, though. What's up? Dominic Courtney, welcome back, man. I appreciate you being here. Are mobile homes on their own land and utilities a good rental? I've never done anything in mobile homes. I know that people have done it successfully, but it's outside of my wheelhouse. And since I haven't done it, I would feel like I'm being a little bit of a phony if I start answering questions, about mobile homes. Yeah, thank you. What was your immediate goal coming into real estate? Was it strictly cash flow or number of units? That's a really good question. So for me, building up a residual cash flow was the most important thing to me. I was really focused on making additional income, and when I first left law enforcement, I went into a sales only position. It was commission only, and I was selling life insurance, and selling life insurance is a lot like flipping a house. So you get paid a lot of money once. So I was getting these large paychecks, but each time I sold a life insurance policy, it's not like I could ever sell them another one. So it was very much so like a churn and burn. So every time I did a great job in the market that I was in, because I was assigned like a territory, the fewer people I had to sell life insurance policies to. So It didn't jive well with my personality. So I wanted to focus on what places I could put that money to make a more recurring revenue. So heavy emphasis on cash flow. The first duplex that I purchased, we did so in cash. So we didn't have a mortgage or anything. The second property that I purchased, I did take out a mortgage. And then, at that point, as I was learning about getting started in the real estate investing, and as I was meeting other people that are investors, that's when a couple of people really put emphasis on taking over, or like considering like the law of averages or the law of large numbers. So even if you have a property that cash flows extraordinarily, the roof is going to be much greater than your cash flow, right? So a single unit is probably never going to actually cash flow for you. And I want to, really drive this point home in that if you take all of the components that make up a house and assign a lifespan to them, like let's say the driveway lasts 50 or 60 years, right, before you have to like replace it. Like what's the cost of that driveway and how much money do you have to set aside on a monthly basis so that 40, 50 years from now, when it's time for you to replace that, you have an appropriate amount of money to just go ahead and pay for full that. Like that's the most conservative you can be, right? And when I first started real estate investing, I was coming hot and heavy off the Dave Ramsey train. So I wanted to be as conservative as possible, which is why I bought that first property in cash. And in putting this massive spreadsheet together, which I should share because I have a link to that, I realized that there is no amount of money that you can put aside on a monthly basis to be sufficient to cover all of the things that property is going to need over the 50, 60 years that you own that property. However, and you could draw the same parallel towards your car and the insurance company. Like if you assign an insurance company to provide insurance for just one vehicle, it's not possible. There's no amount of premium that would be worthwhile for that owner of the car to pay that insurance company, for the insurance company to be down to take on all that risk. Because this car, let's say it has $1 million liability limit. If it accidentally runs through a bus full of people or like a full pedestrian crossing, that exposure, that's going to knock out all $1 million. So if that happens in the 6th month of that policy, then you're talking about needing to collect $2 million worth of premium from that one person to break even after that horrifying accident, right? So from that perspective, it's not worth it on the insurance persons or the car owner side, because nobody is interested in paying $2 million a year for the benefit of having their own transport. It's not worth it, right? And if your costs are that high, there's no way that this insurance company can make a sustainable business model out of that. However, if you write the insurance on 2,000 cars, then statistically speaking, you are able to collect enough premium to cover any potential accident that one or however many cars that you insure could possibly do, because statistically we know that 2,000 cars are not going to run into a full street crossing full of people. So that the law of averages allows you to be much more profitable, or just profitable at all. Because if you've got one rental property, let's say the roof goes out, and that's going to be, especially with these lumber prices, like $10,000. So how many months of rent or cash flow is that going to set you back? So unless you have a really fat reserve on the front end, which you're not deploying because you want to be able to handle all of these things as they come up, then that's going to set you back several months of cash flow. And then if you want to protect that cash flow, then you're always going to have enough in reserves to cover pretty much rebuilding that house over the next 50 years. And that's a slow game. So to answer your question, especially in this single family home space, you can't have reliable cash flow without having an appropriate amount of units. So for the people and like these, mom and pop people that have like 3 or 4 rentals and that's all they've ever had forever, I think you'd be hard pressed if you looked at their books to see a profit turn ever. I just sat down for lunch with a respectable doctor yesterday, and he was telling me about his he has one 4-unit building, and he told me that he has no interest in actually making money from that property. All he's using it for is to cover some of his income so that he doesn't get taxed as hard, right? So if that's your goal, then that's completely different. But as far as like being quote unquote retired or having that passive income, you can't have that with a small number of units as well. They're both extraordinarily important. And I take great skepticism to people that are online that are leading, millions of people in the direction of, hey, look at me, I've got 40 doors and now I'm retired forever. No, you're not. It's a lie. If you've got really fat reserves and you've got, these credit cards that you're going to live off of on the months that everything goes wrong and you have to come out of pocket for some of these expenses, then sure. But that's not the same story that you're promoting on the interwebs. All right, so here's the link to this spreadsheet. It may or may not work. I guess I'll know today after several of you click it. All right. Hi, Ryan. I'm a realtor. This is my first chat, so not sure you answered this. That's okay. Thank you and welcome. How do you suggest one save money to get their first rental property, either wholesale, wait, and save money? So I think regardless of where you're at in life, I think regardless of how much money you do or don't have in the bank, one of your main objectives should be, how can I increase my income and how can I lower my expenses, right? And I think if you're not assessing that question very regularly, then you are, I don't want to say like being a poor steward of your resources, but I would really make sure and I would really want to know, like, are you on track to achieve the goals? I guess if you don't have any goals, then this isn't relevant. So increasing your income and lowering your expenses. And this is also, one of those things that is of utmost importance, because when a lot of people come to this channel and they're like, hey, I have $0, how can I get started in real estate investing? It's like, well, you can't get started in investing at all because you have to figure out, like, you have to look inwards and figure out, like, why in the world don't you have any money? Because money is one of those things that it's pretty easy to not have zero of. So, it's kind of like going to someone's house and it's full of trash, and they're trying to get tips from you on how to make it smell nice. They're not interested in taking the trash out. They want to know what products are available to them to give them a good smelling house. And it's just like, well, no matter how hard you try, you're never going to have a good smelling house because it's full of trash. And I would say that's the same thing for the money side. If there's no money, you have to look at the habits, the behaviors, and all of the things that you've picked up along the way that have you at a $0 balance. And the question of how can I increase my income and how can I decrease my expenses is the answer that will solve that. So always contemplate that. And my brother and I are constantly contemplating that at pretty much every turn. We're looking to do our first little stint in Airbnb this upcoming week, just to see if it is a realistic way to increase the income of some of our properties that are in more desirable areas. So wholesaling is a way that's going to increase your income. What are the other things that you just said? Wait and save money. So I don't like waiting, and I would highly discourage anyone from ever taking like a waiting approach. So I would immediately consider wholesaling, start looking for deals. So increase your skill set, try and figure out how you can sell yourself, how you can sell more properties since you're a realtor. So since you're a realtor, you've got a clear line and a clear way to make money. So I would go through and I would relentlessly start marketing myself. So as a realtor, you should find about 7 different ways to generate leads on like property listings. And I know in the realtor space, I'm not a realtor, but there's a saying apparently that says listers last. So if you're the listing agent, you're going to last in the industry for a long time because you are closer to the deal flow than everyone else. It's easy. All you have to do is list the property on the market, and then other agents are going to tour their clients through your listing. So it's a lot easier on a labor perspective to be that listing agent and just sit back and let other people schedule showings rather than be the one scheduling the showing, running around. So I would feverishly set out to have 7 streams of deal flow so that you can get your listings. And this can come from word of mouth. This can come from, formal networking events. This can come from you doing direct marketing somehow. Using a service like PropStream, where you can look for properties that people don't have mortgages on, pull a massive list of those. If I were a new realtor, I would be pulling lists from PropStream that are high equity and not owner occupied. So, then you could come up with like one sales pitch of just like, hey, I'm sure as you're familiar, the market is bananas right now. You should consider selling your property before the market turns again. And I would, reach out to as many people like that as you can. And as a realtor, since you're in one of these like commission only roles, then you are the only limit of your income there. So I would say, to have already done that and to be on this live stream asking that question, I think you are leaps and bounds ahead of the majority of people that have ever asked that question. So you can feasibly go out and in the next 6 months make enough money to even, buy your property outright, your first rental property. So you are currently in the exact predicament that I was in, that as a realtor, you have the ability to make an extraordinary amount of money, but all the money that you make is a one-time deal. So the trick is you want to make sure that all of the money that you have coming in from this one-time thing goes into assets that make you money in perpetuity. So do not lose focus, do not lose track, and all the money that you are bringing in as a realtor, lower your expenses as much as you can, spend as little of it as you possibly can, and invest all those big commission checks from your 7 streams of deal flow for those listings into rental properties. And I think what you're going to find is once you figure out how to get these 7 streams of deal flow for your listings, as you're able to automate those deal flows, then that's when you're going to be able to really just start sitting back and collecting all those checks. So one of the business coaches that I had, that was his challenge. He said that if you want to be a successful business, you need to have 7 streams of deal flow that are automated. So with very little of your own efforts, you can sit back and watch the business come to you, regardless of what you either are or are not doing. I hope that was helpful. Hit me with some follow-up questions if you've got it. I always thought of a land contract as a risky endeavor and that you could lose the house if you miss payments, but now I see it as a good way to secure seller financing. Nice job. It is. And I would say that land contracts are risky to the seller. They're not risky almost at all to the buyer. So when you're doing a land contract, I mean, the entire exposure, truly, even if you have to put like $5,000 or $10,000 down, the real exposure is on the person that is selling the property. They're the ones that are encumbered with having a high level of trust with the individual that's carrying out the transaction. Because in theory, this land contract, the only security of the contract is the property that is being sold. So Ryan Baker can, convince somebody to sell their property on a land contract. You can go in there and you could pile up all the deferred maintenance that you want to. Things can break and you never fix it. You can run that property into the ground, and the only risk to you is that initial money that you put up. The risk to the person that owns the property, is that property. So, yeah, I would say as you're out there looking for seller financing or land contracts, be aware of that and figure out ways that you can get ahead of them having those thoughts, because those thoughts are enough to prevent anyone from wanting to do those things. Dapper D, what's up? Great answer on farmland versus rentals. Thanks. In your opinion, what's a good way to transfer title ownership of a property between trusted family members? Bonus points on how to do so without incurring a big tax bill, if any, after transaction. Well, I get no bonus points, no CPA here, and don't know of anything like that. However, I would say that at this point, I could not be convinced to take title from anyone with just a quitclaim deed. I bought a property for not long ago. It was the Project Firehouse 01 that I covered briefly on this YouTube channel. I bought the property from $10,000 for $10,000 from a good friend who I trust a lot. But we went through a title company because title companies are a couple $100, but they provide title insurance. So they make sure that there aren't any title issues on that property. And if there are, in like the past 40 years, I think it is for residential, then that title insurance policy will cover it. Now, I am very familiar with a lot of viewpoints on this, but I, for one, since you asked for my opinion, I would never take title to a property or give title to someone else without going through a title company and getting that title insurance. Now, of the 200 properties that we've purchased, to my knowledge, from what the title company has reached out and told me, I'm only familiar with one mechanics lien that came back and tried to get payment from me for that. I don't know what the end result was, because it was none of my worry, because I had title insurance, because I closed through them. So they just reached out to let me aware of the situation, but that they would work through it. And consequently, I never heard anything about it. It wasn't my worry. On that $10,000 property, they found that the property that he just wanted to quit claim over to me actually it was connected to one of the lines of credits that he had. So he didn't know that. He forgot about it. But nonetheless, the last thing that I would want is to be $90,000 deep in that property and then have him default on his line of credit that has nothing to do with me, and that property, be reclaimed. So, yeah. As far as tax goes, I have no idea. I would have to. The tax code is one of those things that is impossibly thick. Thanks. Hey, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm happy you think that was thorough. Sometimes I feel like I'm just rambling, and I'm hoping that I'm even coherent. Differences between a commercial versus a portfolio loan. The portfolio loan, that just means that the bank is holding it in-house. So, a bank could do a portfolio loan that's like a 30-year mortgage at, a pretty low interest rate, amortized, looks, feels, acts just like a Fannie Freddie loan. It's just that they hold it in their personal portfolio. So if someone says portfolio loan, all they're really saying is that particular bank is going to keep that loan on their books. So a lot of these Fannie Freddie, you can walk into a bank, they can do the loan for you. But after that first month or two of payments, you're going to get a letter that says your loan's been sold to or is now being serviced by some other company. And that's because that bank sold that debt to a secondary market individual that buys mortgages. So that way the bank can turn around and use that same money that they just loaned you again to another person that wants to buy a home. So they're making their money on like the origination fees and all of the bank fees associated with starting that mortgage. And then they sell it, get their original capital back, and keep doing it again and again, which is a good business model. But if it's a portfolio loan, that bank is considering it to be a long-term investment. They're not going to sell it. That capital that they give you is theirs, and they're going to keep that note on their books for a long time. When I hear commercial loan, that just makes me think 20, 25-year amortization, maybe like a 5-year ARM, maybe a 10-year balloon, just more consistent with like the commercial side of the market. So your long-term resident, like just that's the distinction that I make in the line of work that I do as it relates to single-family homes. A single-family home loan, traditionally, so if I heard traditional loan, I would think 30-year, super low interest rate. Commercial loan, 20, 25-year amortization period compared to the traditional 30-year period. So it's going to be a higher payment. And then commercial loans also like to throw in things like 5-year adjustable rate mortgages. That way they limit their exposure and the risk to them by having the ability to adjust your interest rate after a 5-year period. And, since it's a business and since, commercial lending, since the market's always changing, having a 10-year balloon in there also limits their exposure. So that forces you to refinance or pay it off at the end of that term or before that balloon. But I mean, if commercial loans were going out handing around, 10-year amortized loans, not many people would be able to afford them. It would really throttle their business and limit their success. So that's why it's like a 20, 25-year AM with a 10-year balloon. So that's what comes to mind on that question. Hope that was helpful. There's the capital expenditures calculator that I was talking about. And if you have the ability to access this, then you'll see my thought process in, lining out all the items that make up a house, its average lifespan, and its average cost. I made this sheet back in like 2017 or 18, right when I was getting started. So I wanted to be super duper conservative and above board. So I was just trying to plan for the worst. And that's what quickly made me realize that it's not just cash flow that's important. It's also the number of units, because large numbers do matter, and pretty funky things happen when you get larger numbers. I think I was watching some Grant Cardone last night, and he made the point that, bigger is easier. And he was saying, these people that say smaller is better, talking about like $1 million businesses, $1 million per year businesses. It's just a lot harder to grow and manage that than it is to have like a $10 to $100 million per year business. And I think I would agree with that. And a couple months ago, I sat next to a guy on a plane, and he ran like a $35 million per year company. And at the time, we were at about $50,000 or $60,000 of monthly revenue. So our rents were like 50 or 60 grand a month. And, he was an older fella, and he got pretty excited in our conversation. So much so that we exchanged information. And he was just remembering, because I was really pumped, because I was like, man, we are so close to hitting that $83,333 per month gross. And that means that we're going to cross that $1 million gross revenue mark. And that made him kind of sentimental, to where he remembered when he was younger, just starting his business, how important and how awesome it was once he crossed that $1 million per year threshold. And he said, he told me, he was like, there is very little difference between like a $1 million per year company and like a $4 or $5 million per year company. And he was just like, as hard as it was for me to get to that first billion, so quickly then was I able to like hit 2 million. He was like, I think it may have even happened like that same following year. Um, and I mean, these things, they happen exponentially. Like it's really, really hard to get started. But then once that momentum gets rolling, and once you continue to be a good steward of the resources that are coming into you, and not, choking the business out by taking massive owner draws to feed a foolish lifestyle, then you're going to start seeing like exponential growth as things start, just like the momentum starts stacking up in your favor. So, he said that he didn't hit any real friction until he was, trying to cross that like $7 or $8 million per year window. And that's when he really had to sit down and plan out how to continue growing that. So I think there's a lot of, I haven't heard that from just one person. I don't even remember the question that got me on that. Boy, what a good rant that was, though, right? Ryan, how do you make sure that your bookkeeping is accurate, especially when your property numbers are growing? Thank you. It is tough. I think that's a fantastic question. So from the beginning, since we started, we had a like dedicated bookkeeping person. So at first we started with a just like a small firm. It was two sisters, and it's tough because, especially if you want to be really strict. So we do our very best to, every time we spend any money, even if I go and spend like $30 at Home Depot later today, I want to know what property I spent those $30 for. With other investors, I've heard that they have like a, if it's like less than $1,000, it just goes into their like overall general maintenance budget. And they don't particularly care to associate it to a particular property. But what we do our best to do is assign every cost to a particular property. Or if I go and buy, something for like 10 properties, then we equally split it up across those 10. So it is probably a full-time job to keep all this stuff straight. So we have since moved on from those sisters to a larger company that is anticipating the scale that we have in mind for ourselves. So we're on the same page there. But I think the biggest thing that we kind of noticed is all the vendors that we initially started with, even our property management. One of the things that I learned is the vendors you use to start with might not be interested in growing with you, right? So you might not have, like, if your plan is to, buy 15 doors, that you might fundamentally be looking for a different property manager than if you just have one or two. So being conscious of the vendors that you use and making sure that the vendors that you use are aware of your growth is pretty solid. As far as the bookkeeping goes, my brother is on top of it. That's one of the things that he does. I know he looks at it every day. We have a meeting with our, accounting firm that we use, and we hire them for like CFO services as well. So we spend a lot of time going through each of our expenses and appropriately itemizing it. We do everything in QuickBooks, and we do each property is its own class inside of QuickBooks. So inside of QuickBooks, we can pull P&Ls for each individual property pretty much at any given time, so long as all of our transactions are reconciled. Any advice pointers that we need to be mindful of regarding tax filing preparation as we are approaching the year end? Thanks again. I love having my brother on this call or on this live stream whenever he's interested in doing it. Just because this is his wheelhouse, our business is such, and it was let me tell you, it was uncanny. One of our business coaches, we sat down with him. He is big on those like strength tests. So my brother and I, we took those, and between the two of us, like we had almost all of the strengths. Very few were missing, and the ones that were missing are ones that make our family members laugh that know us, because you know. But yeah, we had very little overlap. A lot of my strengths he didn't have, and a lot of the areas that I would consider myself to be weak in, he's really strong in, and it just makes for a really solid business partnership. And I'm really thankful that we're brothers. But all the financial side, the tax side, he's on it. So I'm out here. I do a lot of the uh, acquisitions, contractor stuff, management stuff, and he really holds down this side of the house. And when we were a lot smaller, we had a lot more conversations that overlapped, and now those things are becoming fewer and far between. So I'm a little bit more in the dark on that kind of stuff, but of just talking to him on a daily basis. So I wanted to say all of that to preface why I have very little insight to give you in regards to this. But because I have had conversations, and I don't want to not answer this question to the best of my ability. I'm going to think really hard for a second and figure out things that I remember him mentioning on some of our calls. We generally spend about 2 to 3 hours a day on the phone together. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't think I have. I don't think I have anything. So we started working with that new CPA firm towards the end of the last year. So they're finally caught up. They've got all of our stuff under wraps. We've established some pretty solid systems where we review all the expenses. Um, I mean, they regularly talk about whether it's a capital thing or repairs and maintenance. The only thing that we are kind of caught off guard by for the tax season this year is, in order to do the taxes on rental properties appropriately, you have to divide up like the land cost versus the property cost, and just a couple other things that are generally found in the HUD. So each time we close on a property, we forward the HUDs over to our CPA firm, and they do their little thing. But getting the property set up has to be done on an annual basis. So there's a lot of legwork in dividing up like the prices to the properties appropriately. I know that at one point we worked with a CPA that sent us a sheet for us to try and do this ourselves, and it was just over our head. So I would say the only thing that I would really consider is going to a CPA and figuring out how they want to be presented with the information, and how do they want the costs of the property associated, especially on your new purchases, and figure out how you want how they want things to be broken up by like land, property, and all of that. That's all I've got. But maybe that's good. I don't know. I hope that was good for you. That was so helpful, Ryan. Thank you. Awesome. You're the best. I saved about 6K, 8K in commission. And I think I'm starting on the right foot. I'm getting started on those 7 streams of deal flow. Awesome. Yeah, that's great news. That makes me really happy. So I wish I had more time to talk more about all that, especially the 7 streams of deal flow. I would love to help you figure out how to get those automated. And I think, a lot of times having automated streams of deal flow is what a lot of businesses are missing in order to be successful. And I think, focusing on those deal flows rather than like just getting your name out there, and being intentional about building those streams of deal flow, and also intentional about making them as automated as possible, is something that I think a lot of people overlook. And if you're just intentional about it, you're going to be so far above, the other people in your field. Hey, thanks, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for that. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. Super excited. Awesome. And I got the email about mineral rights. We're rolling. We're rolling. That growth is awesome. Thank you. Phoenix Cactus. That's a good name. Please discuss other associated careers which would benefit from having a real estate agent license. Grace. Also, Anisha Wright, congrats on saving 6,000 to 8,000. I mean, again, I want to put a lot of emphasis on, especially like starting from zero, or even starting from less than zero, which is increasingly common with all the, student loan debt and whatnot. Having 6,000 to 8,000 in a bank account is a massive deal. I mean, that's a huge accomplishment, and it under no circumstances, should that ever be overlooked or thought of anything less or short of like spectacular. And the closer you are to zero, most certainly the harder it is to get started. And the longer you can keep that $6,000 to $8,000 around without touching it, dipping into it, or whatever, I mean, your momentum is just gonna absolutely catapult. So keep that up, and all of the disciplines and the actions and like the routines associated with not just getting that 6,000 to 8,000, but also keeping it is just monumental. Keep working on those and honing those in. And yeah, I mean, honestly, we are just so spoiled here in America that, I mean, the average person just has an absolute fortune pass through their fingers over a lifetime. And the true differential is how much of that can you keep? How many of the right decisions can you make stacked on top of each other? So again, 0 to 10K is incredible. And also, thanks, Lewis. I think this is a record. I think before this, the highest super chat that we got was $9.99. So thanks. You have doubled it. Please discuss other associated careers which would benefit from having a real estate agent license. I got to be honest here, in that I just don't know. Having an agent's license is never something that appealed to me. It's not something that I'm ever moderately been interested in, and consequently, it's something that I have put very, very little thought in. And since I haven't even put thought into the benefits of having one, I definitely haven't put any thought into ways that having one would be advantageous. As far as I got, I realized that I was not interested in getting an agent license just to save money on my own transactions. Especially speaking of, Anisha's question, is one of my streams of deal flow for the longest was I would reach out to the listing agents, and I would try and win over those listing agents and become their favorite real estate investor. So anytime they had an investment property, they would think about me first. So I got more deals from not being an agent than I think I would have gotten as an agent. Other careers they could benefit from having a license. I don't know. I have no idea. All right. Post any questions in the chat. Let's see here. In the meantime, check out PropStream, increase your deal flow, and be able to do all your own research. Since I am not a realtor, I use PropStream to run all of my comps. PropStream makes it really easy to analyze a property and figure out exactly how much it's worth. Let's see here. Put my email address up there a little bit earlier, ryan@seekwisdom.us. And then I've also got the Ingram rental calculator. That's an app that you can use. There's no cost to that. You don't have to put in any information. You don't have to have any username or anything like that. You just post it right. I mean, you could just log in, and then you can even save the calculations that you have done so that you don't have to redo them. Before this app, I realized that I was redoing the same calculation at like 5 different points of uh, the 5 different points of just the deal. So saving them just allows me to look at them instead, which is very helpful. We have a mastermind group. My brother and I run. We have a Monday group and a Tuesday group. We've got a little bit of room in Tuesday. So if that is of any interest to you, feel free to watch a video here on YouTube. Just type in Seek Wisdom Mastermind. And it's about like a 25 or 30-minute video. And I just wanted to lay out exactly, because of the cost associated with it, I wanted it to be crystal clear on what the benefits of joining that group would be. So check that out if you're interested. Otherwise, hey, post your questions in the chat and I'm here to answer. Let me see if I've got anything else that I could talk about. I've been trying to keep a running list of potential videos. I've been hitting the foreclosure videos pretty hard lately because they're doing pretty well. I think people are typing in things about foreclosures pretty regularly and looking at those videos. And one of the videos, probably like, I think this, like the first 15 or 20 videos, one of them that I did was about foreclosures, and it's my most viewed video. And because the way that YouTube works, since that video is ranked, so if you type in something about foreclosures, it'll be one of the first ones that pop up. Since I have a ranked video about foreclosures, YouTube pushes my other content about foreclosures a lot harder than just like this live stream. They're not going to push it too hard. Let's see. All that to say, if you wonder, why does this guy talk about foreclosures so much? And that's why. Also, there's just a lot of bad information out there about foreclosures. Like that one video, that's the first time that I ever did anything remotely along the lines of like throwing shade or something by pointing to that other dude's thumbnail saying, don't do this. But it was pretty bad advice, in my opinion. But that's what all these videos are, just my opinion. Thank you, Irene. I really appreciate you always being on the channel. Super fun. Really looking forward to hearing about the deals that you do. That's for sure. Let's see. We've got 19 people on. Let's see if there's anything else that I can go back and expound upon a little bit. As far as land contracts go, I mean, I left this in a little bit of a funny spot, saying land contracts, there's no real benefit to the seller of the property. And for the most part, I agree in that. Like, if it is at all possible for that person to sell that property outright and get a lump sum, then it's likely going to be the best possible solution is a cash purchase. So one transaction and done. That way the seller has no exposure on, will the person that I'm selling this to, the recipient of the land contract, will they keep up with the property and manage it appropriately? However, we bought a package of 11 properties this year on land contract. And the reason that we did that is because the condition of those properties likely were not ones that banks would lend on. I mean, we bought it for $280,000, 11 properties. So that's like $25,000, $26,000 per door. And things get really tricky when the values of properties get that low. So there are things that we can do to these properties to drastically increase the value of them, which we're planning to do. And we made that land contract only 18 months. So it's a very short window. That way we have to go in, make all of the appropriate repairs to increase the value so that banks will be willing to lend on it. And at the end of the 18 months, if we're unable to refinance with anyone, which is not likely, then I guess, Well, we wouldn't default. We would just replace the private capital. So there's that. But some of these are really small. One of the homes is like 500 square feet. And we itemized each of the properties. So one of them there is only valued at like $9,000. I think the lot is worth more than the lot with the home. I think if we tore it down, we would be improving the value of it. So if the owner does not have the energy, time, desire to go about making the appropriate improvements of the property in order to get the property rent ready, or in not rent ready, but like in tip top shape to sell, then land contracts would be of benefit. If the person that has the property is in a really solid financial position, and if they want to delay, like if they had a really good year on an income basis and they do not want to add this to their tax exposure, then selling via a land contract and accepting the balloon later might be a good strategy. Or what we have found in a lot of our cases, if you just want to help somebody and you, in addition to getting a decent price for the property, if you also want to help someone get their start, then land contracts are really powerful. So, I mean, we are the recipient of someone doing that kind gesture for us, where they, on a land contract, sold us 13 properties. That really helped us get our start. That took our gross monthly income from like 4,000 to 12 or 15,000. So it was a really big deal for us. It helped us exponentially. It was a real solid booster or kickstart. But if you do not have any interest in helping someone or delaying tax benefit, and if you don't have any difficulty selling your properties because they're all in good shape, then land contracts may not be all that helpful. Wow. Got 16 people on, and the comment train has slowed down. Questions, comments, concerns, criticisms, anything you got, more than happy to answer them or act like I'm answering them. Man, oh man. My wife just sent me a text that said the Newport Aquarium is closed on Christmas Day. We have somehow formed the strange Christmas tradition of going to the aquarium just because it was open. Because we generally do Christmas with her family or my family on before or after Christmas, not on. So we have had a lot of fun going to the aquarium because it's always so empty. Because, you know, most people do things on Christmas that aren't related to the aquarium. Sad day. Sad day. How to confirm the validation of the land title you are wanting to purchase. Interested in camping property. How to confirm the validation of the land title you're wanting to purchase. By contacting a title company. Uh, you know, that foreclosure video that I was just mentioning, one of the main comments that I got, or the main questions, is like, how do you figure out if there's a lien on the property? Just like, well, it's not really something that you research to figure out. Reaching out to a title company and having them do a title search on the property is the best way to figure it out. And then if it's done through that title company, then they're also going to give you title insurance on the property, which means if anybody comes claiming some sort of ownership, title, lien on that property, then the title insurance will cover it because they missed it in their title search, if that person can prove that they in fact had it. However, from my understanding, most mechanics liens aren't even valid on their face because the paperwork isn't done appropriately. Camping property would be fun. I would just, once you have a contract, like once you're interested in that property and once you have the contract on that property, I would just forward it to a title company and have them do a title search. I wouldn't waste my time doing a title search on a property that I don't yet have a contract on. And just because you have a contract on the property, don't get too excited about it because it might have an insurmountable lien on the property. So, we have had Probably about 15 deals fall through this year because of bad titles, just guessing, and just titles that just couldn't be rectified. So, just because you have a property under contract doesn't mean it is 100% going to be able to close. And in the event that it has some title issue, if you put down earnest money, then you would get your earnest money back because the title issue is not your fault. Given an update, I asked about business line of credit 2 weeks ago. I received a check from the Hurricane Ida damage of $47K. Nice. I will use that instead for my first burr since I already made home repairs. Good work, man. Well, sorry about the property that you lost in Hurricane Ida, but also good job. I think 47,000 is a really solid number to start with. Buying multifamily apartment homes, $20,000 starter kit, multifamily homes. I don't know, Miriam Robinson. I don't like apartments. We own like duplexes, 3 units and 4 units. We don't own anything larger than that, but I'm a stickler. I prefer the single family home space. It's a personal preference. There's a lot of people out there that would adamantly disagree and say that they prefer multifamilies. I don't. I prefer the single family home space. I imagine that all the reasons that I dislike the 2 to 4 unit space disappears the larger you get. Like, I don't think that the same problems that I dislike on the 4 units would exist in like a 100 or 130 unit apartment building. But I don't have one of those, so I don't know. And Dayton doesn't necessarily have any of those. The way that Dayton's laid out is a lot of the big boom happened in like the 60s and 70s, and that's when all these just like streets and streets of 4 unit buildings were built. So to accommodate the workforce that was moving in that just needed these 1 bed, 1 bath apartments. So Dayton especially caters to a very transient community in the multifamily space because of its disproportionate amount, in my opinion, of 1 bed, 1 bath properties. Yeah, good work. Just want 4 to 6 units. Yeah, nothing big. Newport News, Virginia. Yeah, the reason that I don't like I wouldn't be excited about doing this largely because, the pride of ownership isn't there. We're constantly having issues with like keeping the common areas clean, keeping the parking lots clean. I mean, people just throw trash wherever. The way that the trash works here in Dayton is each unit gets its own can. So there's like 4 trash cans to keep up with. People wherever use those trash cans. So keeping those lots clean is really difficult. The way that the buildings are built, there's a lot of different shared walls in these units and a shared floor / ceiling. So everyone's kind of always all up in each other's business. There's not a lot of separation. So we deal with a lot of kind of intra-tenant drama, I suppose. I shouldn't say a lot, but more than I like to deal with, because the amount that I like to deal with is pretty close to zero. And, we had one really, this was like right when we took over property management, but I was really apprehensive in doing the leasing myself. So I hired a different person to lease the property than had been managing our properties. And they put in the worst person in one of our 4 units, and it immediately made all the other 3 units want to move out. And this was also like right at the onset of these moratoriums and whatnot. So getting that person out of there was really difficult. It took a very long time, and it was just uncomfortable for everybody. They did a lot of damage to the building. So meanwhile, in the single family home world, everybody's responsible for their own grass. Everybody's responsible for their own snow shoveling. Everybody's responsible for their own utilities. Everybody's responsible for all their guests that they have over. They're responsible for their fenced in yards. We get no, neighborhood drama reported to us. Everybody is a little bit more independent. There's no shared walls. There's no frustrations. People are not transient. They take the pride of ownership. We kind of set out to say, hey, we're looking to keep these things for 30, 40, 50 years. We're looking for people to partner with to keep us these properties in like tip top shape for the next, several decades. So we get hardly a peep out of those. So, there's like that 80-20 rule, and just the way that our portfolio is, 80% of our problems come from 20% of the doors, and the majority of those 20% of the doors are the 4 units. Now, I will say we've got a 3 unit that's one of those. So we've got 2 3 units. One of them, each floor is its own unit, and then the other one is a ranch. So there's only like one shared wall amongst all of them. So those, we never hear anything out of those. Those do really well. So I think the shared walls play a big role in that. And we've got like one. We kind of joked and said it's kind of our haunted unit is that same unit in one of the 4 units that we have. We've evicted the occupants of that multiple times. So we're really struggling to put someone in there. Just my problems, though. These are my problems, not necessarily your problems. I live in one. Do I pay less interest? Just want to start passive income as an investor. If I live in one, okay. So yeah, if you live in one, you're going to be able to get one of those owner-occupied loans, which means you're only going to have to put 3.5% to 5% down. So you're going to be able to save there 3.5% to 5% down. So 3.5% to 5% down, and you're going to be able to get on. Since it's a 4 unit, since it is an investment property, but it's an owner-occupied loan, you're going to be able to get the lowest of the interest rates on like a 30-year 30-year amortization schedule. So that means your monthly payment's going to be really low. And if there are 3 other units, then you're going to be able to pay off your mortgage. If you're just getting started and you want to, dramatically increase your income, and yes, this is definitely a fantastic way to get started. And I take back the majority of what I said. You're going to be living there. You're going to be very hands-on. You're going to be able to address a lot of the issues. You're going to be able to figure out who's dumping trash all in your parking lot and get them to stop doing it. I know a good friend of mine lives in one here, and his is probably the most immaculate 4 unit on that street because he lives there and pays great attention to it. So I think that's a fantastic way to get started. Building an entire portfolio around those, I would have a little bit more concern over. But doing one to get started, to increase your income, lower your personal living expenses, fantastic. 10,000 thumbs up on that idea. I take back and immediately regret all of the things that I just spent time complaining about. I do not want to deter you from making that move, because I think that move is a life-changing one. But then after you do that very well, I would likely pull you aside and nudge you once you get enough equity built up to consider building a single-family home portfolio. Hurricane damage was just roof leaks and ceiling drywall damage. I had the property repaired and back rented for under $6,000. I have a really good handyman and licensed roofer. Nice. It's wild, isn't it? As an insurance agency, I see a lot of claims go out, and knowing the prices that everything costs, it's just like, man, insurance companies like cool it. But then on the other hand, there are certain times when the insurance companies, just pay for exactly what's needed. So, and people don't profit, but a lot of times people profit big when an insurance claim happens. I clean and have a maintenance guy. Yeah, absolutely. No, you're on the right track. That's a fantastic idea. You should charge as hard into that idea as you possibly can. Huge fan. Big fan. Big encouragement. That's what I want to send your way. I did a video. It's called like House Hacking Success on my friend that has that has the 4 unit that lives in one, and he was in the Army for a little bit, so he did used a VA loan where he had to put $0 down. He actually got like $70 back at the closing table whenever he purchased it, and it increased. So he was renting for like $600 a month. So it took his payment down to $0 per month of like his own personal living expenses. And on top of that, each of the other units is rented out for $700 a month. So he's got $2,100 coming in. His mortgage payment on that property, I can't remember exactly what it is. I got the real numbers to do that video, but yeah, I mean, what he nets from that is like a really respectable side job. And since it was a VA loan, they were pretty meticulous on the inspections, so there wasn't really any deferred maintenance because the previous person that was selling it, I mean, the previous owner, the guy that was selling it, he complied and did all the things that the VA asked for. So it was really cool. Good morning. Good morning and Merry Christmas. Super excited to do this Christmas Eve live stream, and I hope you all got a fantastic kick out of this. I tried to add it, but I couldn't do it. Let me see if I can pull it up this way to get it back on the screen. I thought this was so funny. When I did it last night. Look at that. Isn't that just silly? I know that was the thumbnail for this live stream, but I got such a kick out of that whenever I was making it. Because if you know me, that's not a face that I make under any circumstances. And just being silly and putting that hat on me and those presents, I got a really big chuckle. Do you still require 25% equity in a seller finance deal? That's a really good question. Very insightful. Let's see here. So the one that I just did, so one property, the price was $59,000 is what we bought it for. And it is a 2-bed, 1-bath in a pretty unique area. I would say if the stars aligned, and I mean, if the stars really aligned and we got a really solid appraiser, I would say there's a potential that it appraises for around $75,000 to $80,000. However, as I say that, I also want to put out a big asterisk behind that and say, just because it appraises for that doesn't mean I can sell it for that. And as an investor, there's this massive gray area where, since single family homes are valued based on comparable sales, you've got a lot of sales that are retail sales that go to future owner occupants. And for whatever reason, the difference between a property that is marketed towards owner occupants versus properties that are marketed to another investor, they're massive. And I think a lot has to do that one is as is, and the other is more of like a turnkey, guaranteeing will include a home warranty, that kind of stuff. So if it appraised for that, then it would be solely based around the comps of the retail sales, not based on what I could sell it to another investor for. So investor to investor, $59,000 is like top market, probably the most anyone should or could pay for that. But it's $0 down, and it's on like a 4-year interest only payment. I mean, our payment on that property is going to be about $400. We're going to rent it out for about $750. The spread is good. It makes sense for us to do it. And it's in a location that I'm a huge fan of. It's not far from my house. You can see a McDonald's in its backyard, which I think is really cool. So The optimist of me says that I still have a 25% buffer on that property, but the realist slash pessimist, it's funny how all pessimists consider themselves to be realists, right? But I would say that's probably market is what I'm paying for that. But because the relationship with that fellow, because he's helped me out so much, I mean, I really don't mind doing that. I couldn't build an entire portfolio around these types of deals, but for that one, I don't mind if we go to refinance and we have to bring some dollars to the table to make it work. But likely, realistically, what would happen is we package that with some of these other properties that we have high equity in, to where that would just kind of cancel out. We wouldn't get as much cash back, but we also wouldn't have to bring money to the table. Now, the other deal that I'm seller financing, the purchase price on that one is $65,000. That is the one that needs to be the recipient of about $30,000 worth of rehab. So I'm going to be all in around $95,000 on this property. But here's the cool thing about that property is that it's in a really strong, very solid area. This is a big house, 2-story brick with a detached garage, which is very nice, and plenty of off-street parking. And you've got properties next door on either side that either are listed or have sold for that 150 to 160 range. So for that alone, since it's the same seller on both of those, the close to market of one is really made up by the potential, $50,000 of equity on the second one. Oh, thanks. I was laughing at that thumbnail yesterday. Thank you. I have a property I want to sell. It has $20,000 back taxes. What should I do? It's in Dayton. Well, I mean, as an investor, as someone that buys this stuff pretty frequently, I mean, I would just kind of consider that to be, in the costs. So generally, properties that have that much back taxes are also pretty well like deferred maintenance. So if you want to email me the address, I mean, I would be more than happy to take a look at it and give you my opinion on it. But, let's say the property fixed up, new kitchen, new bathrooms, new roof, new mechanicals, new flooring and paint. If it's worth like $100,000, then immediately, just like the way that I would do things, I would be only wanting to pay $75,000 for that $100,000 home. And then from there, like if $75,000 is the price, is a fair price, then you would have to subtract any of the potential issues that the property has. So if it needs a new roof, go ahead and subtract another, 8,000. So now we're at, 67,000. And if it needs paint and flooring, then, now we're at subtract another 10. Now we're at 57,000. And, now subtract the $20,000 of back taxes, now we're at 37,000. And so far we've only done, a roof, paint and flooring. And, if it needs a new furnace, new water heater, you have to subtract that too. So there are some situations in Dayton where the back taxes are so great that you can't really even sell them due to the condition of the property. We got a couple properties from Lot Links that if, we probably shouldn't have taken them. We're kind of upside down in them. And while I'm a huge fan of Dayton, while I don't want to see any of these properties vacant, I can only be upside down in so many properties before I'm just going to lose my shirt. So this is probably Dayton's hardest issue to navigate. And I know they are, they just got all that money from the federal government, and they're going to use a lot of it to start knocking these properties down. But who knows? Have you ever bought Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac properties? If yes, how is the process? I have, but So, without a little bit more information, maybe we are. I just want to. There's two ways that I think I can interpret this question. The first is, have I ever used a loan from Fannie or Freddie Mac? And the answer to that is yes. And the process is cumbersome because when you are getting qualified, kind of like we talked about earlier, is these banks that originate the loans are not the ones that are going to keep them. They want to sell them to Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac on the back end on that secondary market. So in order for Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac to buy these properties, they have to have this checklist, this cookie cutter, list of requirements that this loan meets in order for them to feel comfortable purchasing it. So if the bank doesn't underwrite the property or the loan appropriately, then they're going to be stuck holding that loan, unable to sell it to Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. So, in order to make sure that the underwriting crosses their T's, dots their I's, whatever else, they require so much paperwork and so much proof from you, the buyer. They pretty much ask for everything except for blood. So, if you are going to, but it might be worth it because Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, that is the longest term and cheapest money that really you're ever going to be able to get in this residential property space. So it might be worth shelling out a little blood to get one of these loans because once you do it once, there's very little that can go wrong that causes you to lose that loan because it's the cheapest money that you're going to get. And historically, they don't call those notes. Now, if you're talking about have I ever purchased when Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac forecloses on those homes, then yes, those are called HUD homes. And those are also sometimes pretty good deals. So the way that process works is once Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac closes or forecloses on that property, then it follows the same process as any court. But with a Fannie Mae Freddie Mac loan, is the way that it works is whatever bank originated that Fannie Mae Freddie Mac loan, it is the bank, Fannie Mae Freddie Mac, the government guarantees that loan. So in order for them to get their money back, what they have to do is they have to show up to the courthouse steps or the courthouse auction, whatever it is, and they are going to bid that property up to the exact dollar amount that they owe. So let's say the opening bid is $20,000, but that bank is owed like $55,000 on that loan. What they're going to do is bid it up to $55,000. So you might be getting real excited going to that auction to bid $25,000 on this property, and the bank first bid opens with $55,000. That's because they're owed on it. And in order for them to recoup their money, what they're going to do after they win that property is they're going to call up Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and they're going to say, hey, got this property. It's foreclosed on. We repossessed it. You owe us $55,000 because you guaranteed this loan. And once they do that, then they are going to get a check from the government for $55,000. Once they get that check, the property now belongs to the government in the form of a HUD, or it's called a HUD home. So you can go to like HUDhomestore.gov and see the entire nation's inventory of these. And from those properties, they're not flexible. There's a process. These HUD homes are generally farmed out to local realtors in the area that are familiar with them. There's a very distinct process that it has to go through. I think like for the first 14 days, only people that are interested in being an owner occupant of that property are eligible to buy it, or a government or nonprofit entity, they can buy it as well. And if 14 days passes and no owner occupant, government entity, or nonprofit bids on that, then it's opened up to anybody that could possibly purchase that, i.e. investors. So once you get past that safeguard, investors can bid on it. And the way that this entire process works, from the time that it's only eligible for owner occupants and nonprofits and government agencies to the time that it's opened up for investors, it's an auction, but it's a weird auction. So instead of everybody getting together on the same date at the same time and the highest bid takes it, what they do is every calendar day they accept bids. If multiple people bid on that property, then they take the highest one. You have no idea what that is. And there's no there's no seeing what everybody else is bidding. You just submit yours, and the highest one gets that property. And they make the bidding is cut off at midnight that night. So all you have to do if you want to bid on the property is get your bid in before midnight. By like 9 a.m. the following morning, they have their decision. They come in the morning and they figure out who the highest bidder is, calls them and says, "Hey, you've won this property." So once it's open up for investors and you find these HUD home store properties, then what you have to do is figure out how hot is this property? What's the chances that someone else are going to bid on it? And if those two are pretty high, then you're going to want to say, okay, well, what's the most that I'm willing to pay for this property? Because unfortunately, if it's not a competitive market, all you're doing is bidding against yourself. Now, they are going to have their price on the property. So let's say, I don't know how they determine this price. That's not something that I know. But I know that if the property is listed for $50,000, the chances of them accepting much less than that are very small. So your offer, let's say it's $50,000, you can't just submit a $20,000 offer, and if no other offers come in, you get that property for $20,000. The government is too strong and able to carry too many losses on a monthly and annual basis to lose more money by selling a property to an investor at a good deal. So they would rather hold on to that property and never sell it or leave it on the market for hundreds of days than take a $30,000 low offer. So at one point, I know that it was like 88% of what they were offering is something that they would accept. So you might be able to take $5,000 off and offer $45,000 and have that bid accepted. But the flip side is if you offer 45,000 and somebody that same day offers 50,000, well, that person that offers the 50,000 is going to get it. So we used to lose a decent amount of those properties because I am really bad at bidding against myself. And my knee-jerk reaction is to offer 88% of whatever it is. And if it works out, great. If not, shucks. But there have been times where I've bid like $5,000 over what they were asking because it was in an area that I'm a huge fan of and I wanted the property. And I thought that just from looking around, you would be able, it didn't need as much work as that, which is another thing that I forgot to mention, that it makes this atypical from normal foreclosures. And that is that once this is repossessed by the bank and sold back to Fannie Freddie, when they hire these realtors, there is a limited amount of keys that the doors are put on. I don't know how they do it, if they buy tons of locks in bulk, if these realtors that do HUD homes just have hundreds of the same locks. But there are these things called HUD keys that realtors have that use HUD property, or that sell HUD homes. And any property that is a HUD home is like one of like 5 or 6 keys. So you do have access to the interior. So while you're bidding on this property and figuring out how much you can bid, you actually can walk through the property to see what all is needed and what all you can bid. And it's kind of sad. So like that entire process, because banks and governments are involved, it takes so long. So sometimes, we've purchased these HUD properties and they've been vacant for years because this process has taken so long. Other times they've been vacant for like 6 to 8 months. The utility companies, they're going to be the ones that will tell you. But the reason that's important is a lot of these utility companies require things be pressure tested and inspected and permits pulled before you can get the utilities switched back on. Was it difficult vetting contractors in the beginning? Absolutely. Absolutely it was. I would recommend starting with small jobs and hoping that they make a mistake so that you could see how they respond when they're asked to come back out and fix something. And before I work with or like give over an entire property to someone, I really do my best to give them like a very small job. Like one of our best contractors right now, he could finish just about anything in 2 weeks. I remember sending him on a couple of our maintenance calls when I first met him, just to see, how he did and what his work was like, and just how working with him, talking to him, just getting a feel for him that way. So I prefer to give people very small jobs before giving them very big jobs. But, I think any investor can tell you nightmares about getting ripped off by contractors. And it's just, unfortunately, a stripe that every investor is going to have on their sleeve in the long run. There's no way to get it 100% of the right all the time. That's not a reason to be laissez-faire or kind of flippant about getting ripped off by contractors. You shouldn't take it lightly. But at the end of the day, it's going to happen. It's just a matter of how or when. Sneaky rascals. Merry Christmas. That thumbnail is for you, Winston. Advice on finding and purchase. And if you're wondering to yourself, what thumbnail is he talking about? If you're just on here, well, I'll throw it up again. Look at that fella. Look at big old Santa. Advice on finding and purchasing of a cheaper first home. Any cautions or concerns? Oops, I'm trying to take that. I need to take that banner off myself. I forgot about it. I was just looking down and I kept seeing me and I didn't think anything of it. Advice on finding and purchasing of a cheaper first home. Any cautions or concerns? I think this is one of my favorite things about real estate investing, and also one of my least favorite things about real estate investing. And that's that every single thing that could go wrong has a price tag, right? So the appropriate formula for buying a property is, market value. So you can look around at other properties and you can see what the real value of that property is. Because, most of these established neighborhoods, a developer went through and they built a total of like 4 or 5 different styles of home. And they have a lot of these. So you can, within, very, very tight margins, get an appropriate value of this house. So for this example, we're going to work it back just like that tax question and saying, okay, if this property's market value is $100,000, we know that if everything is perfect, if it's like a flip, if you're looking at, new kitchen, new bathrooms, new paint, new floors, new roof, new mechanicals, nice clean basement. If there is a basement, then you're going to need to pay $100,000 for that home. And it's a fantastic deal. If you are buying a property that is $20,000, then what that tells me, especially if you can look at the market and say, if everything was fixed, then you're going to need to pay, then that property is worth $100,000. Well, now you could assume that the property needs around $80,000 worth of work. However, this is the issue that like investors like me, we would have no interest in, because at the end of the day, if we're going to have to pay $100,000, so $20,000 price plus that $80,000, how much it needs in work to make it $100,000, we have zero incentive to do that, right? Because we're not making any money and we're not getting compensated for our time. We're going to have all the feel goods of taking this horrible property and bringing it back up to speed and, making the street appeal nice and keeping the integrity of the other homes in the area, because nobody likes living next to a really derelict, dilapidated property. But there's no room for the person to do that, because there's all that headache that you have to go through just to not get compensated at all. So there has to be a buffer there, right? Now, how much your time's worth and how much equity you want is totally up to you. But I would suggest doing no less than 10 to 25%. So that means that if a property needs $80,000 worth of work, the purchase price is 20, and it's going to be worth $100,000. that means you've overpaid. You want to get anywhere between $10,000 and $25,000 off. So your all-in price is going to need to be somewhere in the $75,000 to $90,000 range. So that means if $20,000 is the asking price, you're going to want to say, sorry, can't do that because it needs $80,000 worth of work, right? So you can either offer $10,000 or, if you get 25, if you want 25% in this room, then the person actually needs to pay you $5,000 in order for you to take this property from them. I promise this is getting lengthy, but I'm going to bring it back full circle. And that the downside of buying a cheaper house is that it has a lot of deferred maintenance and a lot of work. However, if you know for sure that a brand new, perfectly flipped home is worth $100,000, then there's not much that can happen to where you can go in and forcibly buy that like rent ready property that's worth $100,000 for 75 to 90,000. So if you want to get compensated 10 to 25% of the property, if you want to have that in equity, the chances of you being able to negotiate that off of a recent flip is pretty slim unless the market doesn't support that price anymore. And if that is just sitting there for a while and the person that flipped it just wants to get their initial capital back and move on and willing to kind of abandon their equity in the deal. Otherwise, if you want to make money on the equity, and if you want to build that up, then the only realistic way that you can get a 10 to 25% of equity in a deal is to buy a cheaper property and slowly fix it up. So in this example, when we're saying that the property needs $80,000 worth of work, I mean, we're using, just blanket numbers that are retail. But if you have a friend, if you can do this work on the weekends, if you can, negotiate with the contractors to get it done cheaper than like the retail prices to get this work done, then you could stand to make a lot of money. So what I would just double check and make sure of is that if you see a property that they're marketing, well, it's worth $100,000 and we're only asking you $50,000 for it. Well, you're going to want to go through and you're going to want to do a complete inventory on all of the deferred maintenance and any potential items that property needs. And then using the same formula, going from the market value and then walking back all the deferred maintenance, that's where your real price is going to come from. So a lot of times, even if a property is listed for $50,000 on the MLS, that's still too high based on the amount of work that property needs. So you do not want to accidentally find some foundation issues or some really large things if that property, just because it's listed for 50% off and needs in your first inspection very little work. You're going to want to be very thorough, because even though you've got $50,000 worth of wiggle room before you get upside down, you don't want to give up that 10 to 25% equity. So you want to make sure that you build you into that deal enough to where you're getting compensated for putting all the work into this property. And you also want to make sure that you're not accidentally overpaying, even if it is 50% off. So go through and mark out, $10,000 for a roof, $5,000 to replace all the flooring in the property, and kind of create your own scope of work. Because to circle it back to my initial statement, the pro and con of real estate investing is that every single thing has a price tag. So because of that, this formula is actually really clear cut. And I would say the only time it's not clear cut is when you're in an overly competitive market where people are willing to lose money in order to live in that area. And I would say you should never invest in any of those places unless you get so highly compensated by whatever's in that area, you could justify the losses and the lack of utilization of this formula. Otherwise, I would say my biggest caution and concern that you should look out for is all of the things that property needs, because even though $50,000 sounds like a lot of money, real estate has the uncanny ability to eat so much capital that you could spend $50,000 in repairs real quick, and it will take you years to recoup. But then again, if you put on your 30, 40, 50-year goggles, over the long term, you're likely going to make money so long as you're not really negligent in your management of real estate, which is another beauty of real estate investing, is that if you just lengthen your time horizon, very little can go wrong. So lengthy. Do you have any links to PropStream? Why, yes, I sure do. It's one of my favorites, actually. You should click it. You know what? Because I know, and you know what? I'm going to put it on the screen while I'm looking for it. I'm going to go over here, and then I'm going to find this link. Then I'm going to post it. So I'm going to copy it. Now I'm posting it. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go one up. I'm going to mute this computer machine. I'm going to pull up the live stream in YouTube because that's the only way I really know how to do this. The Christmas Eve real estate chat, 18 people watching. And now I'm going to go through all these comments. I'm going to find mine, and I'm going to click pin. So now I've pinned the message to my link of PropStream, where I think you should click for a 7-day free trial to increase your deal flow, analyze your own properties, do your own comps. And if you follow that formula that I just used, PropStream empowers you to come up with your own starting point that you feel comfortable with. Because it gives you the ability to analyze and select your own comps. That way you're not being manipulated or accidentally lied to by a realtor that puts together their own list of comps, because unfortunately, some people are wrong and some people just want to sell a property. So now that I've done that, I'm also going to close the screen out. Turn my volume back on. And now we're golden. So thank you. Thank you for asking for my link to PropStream. I'm really looking forward to seeing people use it. First time buyer programs. I don't know much about them. Thanks, man. You know, every time I've worn this shirt, I say to myself, that looks like a Christmas shirt. So today I saw it hanging in my closet and said, what better day to wear a Christmas shirt than on the Christmas Eve live stream? It needs all of that. It's on Victor. Oof. Will you please give us the link to PropStream? Oh, yes, I will. Man, you guys making me happy. What a good Christmas present, getting people to click that link to PropStream. Yeah, send me an email. Let's talk. Victor, that's not what I meant to send. There we go. There's my email address. Yeah, shoot me an email. Let's talk about this property on Victor. Let's see what we can make happen. All right. Yeah, absolutely. Real estate's one of those good things. Make a lot of money off of it. Were you afraid to leave law enforcement before getting into real estate? Yes, absolutely. Leaving law enforcement was hands down one of the most difficult things that I've ever done. I mean, I had it all mapped out, you know, just the things that come along with a government job of just having that security, knowing that the chances of you getting fired are so slim. And since I started so young, I was going to be able to retire at 48 at like 80% of my highest paid 4 years as a pension. So, you know, just the pay scale when I left, I was at like $44,000 a year. You know, if I'd put in a good year's work at, you know, I could probably realistically end up around the $120,000 mark. That was before all this money printing started to happen that I made that. So, Ultimately what I had to do was just like we did that real estate math problem. I did that same thing. And it's just like, okay, um, I know for a fact that if I stay in law enforcement with promotions with these 3% annual increases, it's embarrassing to point all this stuff out now, knowing, but like these were my serious thoughts. Like, okay, I get a 3% increase um, on an annual basis that I can count on. My 80% of the highest paid, you know, uh, 4 years in perpetuity. I've got my 401k that I'm contributing to. Like, how much money would I have to make in leaving law enforcement to justify leaving law enforcement? And one of the things that I had to do, that when I started reading a book per day, it kind of challenged me to do, and that was, go through my individual skill sets and figure out what my strengths were that I could monetize. And my work ethic has always been something that I've been pretty confident in. I can work pretty hard. So that was my biggest strength. Not skill, but just like strength that I could point to when I was deciding to leave. And law enforcement's one of those things where regardless of how hard I worked, I would never get compensated for it. So knowing that, I decided to start looking for jobs that would compensate me according to my work, with which, I pretty quickly fell into the commission only jobs. So I just had to do a massive math problem and say, can I make, X number of dollars? So I think once you factored in, and, I consulted a few of these like financial, like these cops that became financial planners or whatever on like the side. I, read a lot of books. I considered myself to be pretty financially savvy. The consensus was you had to like double your pay, and that's what you got in benefits as far as like health insurance and, all these retirement programs, your pension, all that. So could I make more than $88,000 a year on my own? And, that was the question that I had to wrestle with, because if the answer was yes, then I would be better off making $88,000 a year on my own, doing my own thing, and living off of, less than $40,000 a year and saving the rest of it. Similar to like, the pension stuff. So when I left, one of the only reasons that I could work up the courage to leave was that after doing that, strengths assessment, that soul searching, at the end of the day, what I fell back on was my wife and I were fortunate enough to have about a year-long runway in savings. So we could take care of all of our monthly expenses and be comfortable for a year before it got real uncomfortable. So I decided to give myself 6 months to go out there and make something happen. And if I could not turn a profit or start making an appropriate amount of money inside of those 6 months, I was going to start filling out applications again to getting back into law enforcement. Because at the end of the day, I had a fantastic resume for law enforcement. And, it's one of those things where every single department in the nation is short staffed. So once I got over myself, once I got through the lies that like the subculture of law enforcement, a lot of the guys were just like, oh, dude, you don't want to start over as a rookie again. It's like, yeah, well, I also don't want to rot for the next 30 years here. There's a lot of bravado, which is necessary to get through a career long of law enforcement. But for leaving and being kind of considered by that subculture to be weak, that was another battle that I had to get over and go through. So yeah, I empathize greatly with everybody trying to leave a stable job. It is very difficult. And especially when you look at statistics that show like the amount of people that fail, it's really hard to think that you're so special that your business can work out and that you would end up, having something to show for it, for taking that massive leap of faith or that jump. But, now being on the other side of that and being 4 or 5 years out of working law enforcement and seeing, the amount of equity that we've built up, the amount of gross income, the amount of kids that we've been able to have. Because a quick sidebar is my wife and I, at one point we discussed, because of our lower income, it would have been life would have been so difficult for us to have 4 kids on that like law enforcement salary and that law enforcement schedule. So we likely wouldn't have been able to have all 4 kids and stay prudent to our finances as well. So, I mean, now you can look at it and it's so simple. Like what would the cost have been for me to stay? And, without the kids included, you're talking about like, a seven figure price tag on staying rather than leaving. And then, how do you even quantify? And there's no way to even say like I couldn't have had 4 kids if I stayed in law enforcement. But I know some cops have that many kids or more, and they make it work somehow. But so it's probably not fair to consider that. But we want to have a lot more. We want a minimum of 6, and just the amount of time that I'm able to spend with them and the amount of stress that I don't have because I'm not in law enforcement, it's worth it all around. I don't regret it at all. The last thing that I wanted to mention about this before I look down and read some more questions that I know for sure you guys have typed in, because we don't want to lose this momentum, because I got all day because it's Christmas Eve. I told my wife I'd be home around noon 30 or 12:30, whichever you prefer. The last thing I wanted to mention about leaving law enforcement was when I first left, one of the things that I told myself was, because I know my backup plan is being a cop, and I know this was before I was familiar with how cush these Ohio unions are. Down south, cops work 12-hour shifts. Because I know that, my backup plan is being a cop. I have no idea if this is going to work or not. The last thing, because one day I started my day at 9 a.m. This was when I was an entrepreneur. And I ended my day at 2 or 3 because I completed all of my work. And I was feeling good. But then I realized, if my backup plan is being a cop and I'm going to go work 12-hour shifts, then it's going to be so disheartening to myself. And it's going to be so pathetic of me if I sit here working 6-hour days, working for myself, knowing that I have to go back to working 12-hour days in law enforcement if this doesn't work. So, how silly of me would it be to say, oh, I don't know why it didn't work when I wasn't putting in similar hours. So for the first several years, I worked a minimum, and probably still now, but just in different ways. I made sure that I worked a minimum of 12 hours. And to really drive home that point, I think it wouldn't be unreasonable for me to estimate that I spent, 16 hours working for the first 2.5, 3 years that I left law enforcement, just because I think every single business owner can point to a series of events that could happen that could crumble their business. And it took me a really long time to be comfortable to make that switch of, okay, I'm safe. I left law enforcement. I don't have to worry about going back there anymore. I would say that's probably a recent mental thing that I've gotten over. Man, you didn't ask me any additional questions. So you mentioned PropStream, HUD with realty, best other sources of new listings and legitimate properties for sale besides Zillow, etc. I recorded this video about 17. That would be incredible. 7 streams of deal flow in which I outlined a lot of the ways that we commonly get properties, and all of the ways that you can possibly get a property are the things that we try and do. So we've got wholesalers. I sift through a lot of trash that they send. But you can't write off all the trash that they send, because occasionally there's a gem in there that nobody catches because they're all worn out from all the trash that they've been analyzing, that they've been sending over. So wholesalers are a big deal. Having good relationships with a lot of realtors is probably very advisable, because realtors will often, especially if it's an investment property, they're going to have their set investors that they talk about deals with as they're like coming to fruition, as they're gathering the information on the property before they list it on the MLS. So it's very beneficial to have a solid relationship with multiple realtors, multiple wholesalers. Other than that, I mean, I can point to at least 3 properties this year that we've purchased just from word of mouth from our contractors that know people that have properties that they don't want, and they don't want to deal with realtors or whatnot. So we get a lot of off-market stuff just via word of mouth. I do my best to never stop talking about real estate investing ever. And whenever somebody mentions a property, I do my best to always look at it, regardless of what it is. And I mean, just by blabbering my mouth around, if somebody says, "Hey, I have this property," my hope is that somebody within earshot is just like, "Oh, I know this guy. His name is Ryan, and he buys properties." And then, the foreclosures, fantastic. Keeping up with the auctions, staying current there. Prop stream, as you're driving around, you see properties that you're interested in, finding those. That's a really big deal. You can, skip trace people. What I would love to do, and, anybody listening, now or in the future, I would love to start like a marketing side and do a lot more direct mail marketing and start utilizing this skip tracing software a lot more. I would love to start a partnership or even bring that piece in-house. I would love to be able to do that, not as a replacement for the wholesalers, realtors, or any of the ways that we currently get leads, but just in addition, because there are definitely some specific geographical areas that I target that I would love to just saturate all the time in marketing, so that anybody in that area knows that they can easily sell their house whenever they would like. I would love to bring that in-house. I think if I had unlimited bandwidth, then I would spend a lot more time looking into that. So yeah, I would watch that video. I tried really hard to capture all the different ways that you can get into real estate investing. But of course, the 7th way that I listed was kind of a little bit of a cop out. And that's that, any other creative way that you could think of. And just going back to the fact that, like, there are as many ways to make money in real estate investing as there are people investing in real estate. There are just as many different ways to find deals in real estate as there are people looking for deals. I just met a guy recently where he combs through the obituaries and figures out where these people that just died lived, and are their properties going to be tied up in probate, or are they, part of a will that somebody has that they just want to sell. So, I mean, I've never heard of that. I don't know many people out there doing it. It seems like kind of a sad thing to do, but at the same time, like, if you have a clearly defined problem that you can solve for people, and that you're confident in your ability to solve that problem for people, that now, all you have to really do is find as many of those problems that you know how to solve as you can, and you've got probably a business on your hands. Ian Clip, what's up, man? I haven't seen you in so long. Thanks for stopping by on this wonderful Christmas Eve. So those of you that have never seen Ian Clip's name around here and are confused as to why in the world did Ryan just get so excited to see Ian Clip here, and that is because Ian Clip was the very first comment on this channel that I got that was from someone that I did not know. So I don't know if any of you have tried posting videos onto the World Wide Web before, but it's scary putting your thoughts out there for just anybody to see whenever. And especially at first, when I wasn't confident that anyone outside of my network would ever see them. It was really cool because not only did Ian comment, Ian also said something to the extent of, "Wow, you sure do know what you're talking about." So thanks, Ian Clip. Thanks, Ryan, for answering my question. I want to pivot into real estate, but the Boston area is very pricey for old 70 to 100-plus-year-old homes. They start at $400,000 to $500,000 for homes that need updates, etc. Yeah, man. I mean, that's what I did as well. I was a cop in Durham, so Durham, North Carolina. I mean, when I first started, East Durham, you could buy any house that you wanted to for like $5, $10, $15,000. But now you can't even buy like one of the condemned homes for less than 100. I mean, that's probably higher now. I mean, not only now are they buying those condemned homes for 100, they're knocking them down and they're building like $300,000 structures on this tiny little East Durham lot where drive-bys and gang activity still happen regularly, and people are out there paying $500,000 to live there on some of the worst streets. So I feel you, man. I feel you. But at the same time, when I would really suggest, and I'm not trying to have like a massive influx of people moving to Dayton because, look at all these deals I'm doing. But man, you got to move to where the opportunity is if you want to change your situation. And if you look around you and you're in an area where you see all the people making the moves and doing successful things are people that, have millions of dollars behind them and tons of experience. Well, that's a steep market to get into. Move into a place that's a little bit sleepier, that doesn't have as many, these hedge funds attention yet. That's probably a good idea, especially in real estate. You got to move to where the opportunity is. I think that's why you see a lot of the real estate guys, they got private jets and whatnot. That's one of the videos when I decided to leave and decided to move. It was another Grant Cardone video. My wife can't stand him, but I listen to a lot of him, and once you get through like his arrogance and his bravado, he says a lot of good stuff. But yeah, you got to move to where the opportunity is. I get that it's a tight market, but you don't have to live there. We're not rocks, we're not trees. I love my parents. Would love to see them every day, but hey, part of the cost of me moving up here is not seeing them every day. So that's tough, but I've been able to provide for my family a life that we would not have otherwise been able to had I stayed in that North Carolina area. Suggestions for becoming a new home business owner, especially online without a physical product to sell. Also monetizing YouTube videos. Man, Phoenix Cactus, I sure do appreciate the confidence you have in me. I don't think I'm very qualified to answer most of those questions. A new home owner? Yeah, you should do that. I support that. Make sure it's the right kind of home and make sure you have an exit strategy from that home. Either house hack it to make it an income thing for you, or like the house that I currently live in, it's going to be a fantastic rental once I move out of it. We might even Airbnb it. Who knows? But running a business out of your home, I mean, the same business rules apply. Make sure that you're scalable. Make sure that you have, ownership of the deal flow. Yeah, I don't know, man. Monetizing YouTube videos, I don't think I do that great of a job. I mean, I don't really have too many products. I've got, an affiliate with PropStream because I actually believe in them. I've been reached out to by a lot of people to do affiliates with them, but I'm not down to just stick things in front of people because people ask me to, if it's not something that I use or personally see value in, you're not going to see me pushing it. I've got that mastermind. I don't believe in people buying courses. I make myself available on this live stream for all these questions on a weekly basis, so that anybody that's looking to get started in real estate investing can ask me directly if they want to, on anything that might be keeping them stuck. There's no real monetization that happens on this live stream. People can join the mastermind if they'd like. As Irene, it's men only. So there is that. So I think the last statistics I saw on my YouTube channel was it was 70% dudes, 30% female. So I'm alienating 30% of the audience there right off the bat. So if you're a lady, the only way to interact or to, send money my way on this YouTube channel would be the affiliate link with PropStream, or just watching the ads on the videos. So I don't think I'm a good person to talk to about, monetizing the YouTube channel. I want to get more serious about putting out content on a regular basis. But at the end of the goal, my money is not to be making money on YouTube. It's to be finding the people that were like me, that were like my dad, that were like Will, who are not in a position or know people that regularly interact with people that have done the things that you dream of doing, right? So my whole goal with this channel is to broadcast myself to as many people that are reminiscent to us as I can find, and the people that want to change their lives, that want to improve themselves, and just have long form conversations about how to do that and get it done. I don't know if I'm doing a fantastic job of marketing myself. I mean, but hey, I'm genuine. I know that. And I know that when I do make myself available, I'm present and I'm here. But as far as making money on YouTube, I think I'm a bad one to model after, because I see people knocking down like 6 figures a month off YouTube, and I am not. I think I'm right around $500 a month for like the ad stuff. Is it easier acquiring deals now in comparison to the beginning? I would say so, only because, you know, I have accidentally kind of established a reputation for myself, right? Like, I've been through the process at this point with so many realtors and wholesalers that if I say I'm going to buy a property, then they know it's going to happen, right? Like, we've gone through the process so much, and you know, I'm on a lot of realtors and wholesalers short list, so they know that if they have a property that fits the criteria that I tell these fellas, then the chances of me closing it are pretty high if I say it's something I'm interested in. I don't know of a deal we haven't closed on, so I guess when I'm saying pretty high, it's 100% unless it falls through with title. So I guess I could see why I said pretty high. It's not like I've ever backed out of a deal that I said that I would do or anything like that. We're also able to operate with a level of comfort that that like we know that, like, for example, I just recently made a big mistake. It's a mistake that I shouldn't ever aspire to make again. It's a very expensive one, and it was a very reckless one, and I have very harsh criticisms of myself uh, about it. But that is that I accidentally bought a property, and again, very reckless. I signed all sorts of paperwork. I signed the lead disclosure agreements. I went to the property and I looked at all of these papers on the door and did not read them. This sounds ridiculous, and I've been apprehensive to mention this on the channel just because it's so easy to Monday morning quarterback and like rip me a new one on this, but that's okay, you know, because I deserve it. But a lot of times when you buy vacant properties, there's a lot of paper that's just attached to the door, whether it's a previous citation for grass, whether it's a, hey, somebody came in and winterized the units, or like, you know, hey, I want to buy your house, or hey, I'm a handyman. You know, there's all sorts of just advertisements and city citations and so much stuff posted to these vacant properties that I just don't look at the paper anymore. And then, you know, as far as to why I signed the lead disclosure without reading it fully, I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that one. But all that to say, I recently purchased a property that it has been condemned for lead poisoning. So like somebody got poisoned at that property from lead. I guess some kid. Not to be insensitive, but that house has been condemned since then. So we bought the house. We started doing some work, and we got a call from a lady at the health department saying, no, this house is condemned. You need this permit. You need that permit. All the work that needs to be completed needs to be done so by one of these licensed lead people. So we're going to be very upside down in that house. Now, it is not something that I should ever do again. But in the beginning, if I did this, it would have wrecked us. We didn't have enough margin. We wouldn't have had enough margin to like recover from this. We would have had to all of the money that we're going to empty into it would have been from our own pockets, and we would have, it's not like I got a screaming deal on this property either. It's not like I picked it up for $5,000 or $10,000. I paid very close to, going through that formula that we just went through. I paid very close to the top dollar that I could on this. So any money that we put in and above the repairs that I had scheduled for it, we're going to be upside down in. So it's going to be really tough to recover from. But nonetheless, we are going to be able to recover from it because of the quantity that we have now. So even though I made a massive, probably $40,000 to $50,000 mistake, hopefully not a $100,000 mistake, right? It's going to be easier to recover from because of the momentum that we have, because of the scale that we have, and because of the gross monthly revenues that we have. Whereas early on, a mistake like that would have crippled us. Now, the chances of us making a mistake like that early on is probably pretty slim because I paid a lot more attention to every single aspect of all of the deals that we did. And all of the mistakes that I made on this property are because we were really rolling. I mean, this was during the time where we put 30 properties under contract. We had like 35 properties under contract in a month. So I was kind of blinded by the quantity and didn't pay as close attention to the property as I should have. So it's on me. But to answer your question, yeah, a little bit easier now because our margin for error, we can withstand a little bit more. So if we buy a property that needs a new roof or something, the outlay of capital to do that is a little bit less stressful than in the beginning. But as far as like the deal flow, not really. It's about the same. A lot of deals come our way. Miriam Robinson, I'm working on my credit before buying. 700 credit score versus 800. Does that make a big difference when getting the bank loan for the property? My brother would say no. He would say anything higher than 640 is fine. If you're in the 700s, you're golden. It might be 680 if you're higher than 680, or maybe it's 640. I don't know. Anything higher than 700 though, you're great. So you're going to be solid. You're going to probably qualify for the best loans. What was the hardest thing to learn when you first began investing in real estate? No, I have not read that book. Also, I would like to say that as far as once you become a real estate investor, the chances of you having an 800 credit score go way down because every time you buy a property, they're going to want to check your credit. So especially if you're using the Fannie Freddie. So if you have plans of utilizing all 10 Fannie Freddie loans that you're able to get, then you're going to have 10 inquiries on your credit report, which is way over the amount of suggested inquiries that you have in a very short amount of time, depending on how quickly you buy those. So one loan officer told me that when they're looking at the credit scores of real estate investors, anything like the highest they would expect to see ever is like a 740. What was the hardest thing when you began investing in real estate? One of the best things that I did that I think I did a really good job of is I surrounded myself with people that had portfolios, and I was able to get myself in with a lot of other real estate investors. And I never acted like I knew anything when I first started. And before I made any decisions, I ran it through 3 to 4 other investors. I talked to them ad nauseum about things that I might be overlooking. And I think that's the way to go. So plugging in to your local network where you're looking to invest in, building up multiple relationships with other investors, contractors, realtors, wholesalers, the whole gambit, because real estate is more like a franchising model than it is like starting your own business, right? So you've got entire, industries built around servicing real estate. So like if you were to start a Wendy's, right, there's not a single thing that you would need that you couldn't consult a dozen other people on, and any problem that you ever have in running your Wendy's or whatever other franchise restaurant, dozens of other franchise owners have had those same issues. And you shouldn't look at real estate investing as any different. You know, real estate is one of the oldest industries out there. Ever since people have needed shelter, real estate investing has been a thing. So there are dozens and dozens of people locally and nationwide. Nationwide, it's not dozens, it's millions of people that have experienced something similar. So if you just reach out to enough people, you're going to find someone that has dealt with exactly what you've dealt with. So I would say, because I approached it that way, I was able to circumvent a couple decades of like trial and error had I tried to do everything myself on my own. Man, we are going so strong on this live stream today. It's got to be that thumbnail. We're almost 3 hours in, and we've had pretty close to 20 people the entire time. You know what? It might be because everybody's not working today. Who is working today? Let me know in the chat if you're working. There's a difference between a 700 credit score versus 800. Around mid to high 700s is where things stop making a difference versus 800 as of 2021. I agree with that. I mean, credit scores I've got a forever vendetta against them. My feelings about credit scores are that of, my opinions about like the public school system. I did not have a good experience in the public school system. You don't know me. I'm different. You can't judge me based on the standardized criteria. I'm different. Greetings from Toronto. Man, Ian, Clip, and Rick, you guys, all we need is a Barry and Art, and we would have all the Canadian people on here that I know of, at least. I have not read that random walk down Wall Street. I will, though. I will. Let's see here. Actually, at noon, I am meeting someone at a property that a contractor referred me to. So I might buy a property later today based on the word of mouth. The random walk Wall Street. Yeah, I'll read that this week. Is buying a condo a good investment? I probably wouldn't if I had other options available to me. The only thing that I really dislike about the only thing that I really dislike about condo associations are that the condo association can dictate things that you can or cannot do with your property. Like I know some condo associations have it to where there can only be so many rentals at one time in that community. So you don't have as much latitude with condos as you would otherwise. So if you're going to invest in condos, I guess my advice would be also make sure that you're active on whatever board or association is making all the rules. That way you can be a little bit more insulated from these wild tyrants that like to take political positions. Do I need an accountant? Probably not at first. You could just consult one. You can keep the books on a couple of your properties all at one time. But if you were to start achieving some level of scale, then I would highly recommend it. I would say probably after you do your first 4-unit, if you were to get another one, then I would start meeting maybe with an accountant on a quarterly basis to make sure that all your stuff is up to snuff and completed satisfactorily to where at the end of the year they could just take all your information and input it into whatever it is that they need. And then your like third or fourth deal, I would highly suggest that you start paying like a bookkeeper or somebody to do stuff full time. But that's also because books are not my strong suit. If I was someone where, Excel sheets and QuickBooks, and I liked labeling transactions like that, and I didn't mind doing it. That advice might not be up to snuff, but if you're out there looking for deals and trying to stay active with people, and trying to, what do they call it, wheeling and dealing, then your books will likely take a back seat in short order, and that's one of those important things that shouldn't take a back seat. Awesome one. I'm listening while working. Awesome. Well, thank you, man. Thank you for working on Christmas Eve. That's awesome. What kind of tax write-offs on owner finance property? Merry Christmas and working right now, then graveyard. Nice. What kind of tax write-offs on owner finance property? I really don't know. I would assume that the interest that I pay to the land contractor, to the seller, would fall on the interest that can be written off. And then I would suggest that if that owner had an underlying mortgage, then whatever interest that he's paying on his, underlying mortgage is also the same as a tax write-off. And I would say that anything that, he would need to pay for, so he would have no reason to make any repairs, maintenance, or capital expenses on the property if I'm the land contract holder. So all of those things would be written off by me. So for the owner that's doing the financing, he would be able to write off any interest that is paid by him to whatever underlying mortgage that he has. And I should be able to write off any taxes or any interest that I pay, plus any of the normal things that you write off for running a business. But again, not a CPA. I'm working today. Hey, Will. That's funny. Do you wanna hop on this call? Up to you. I can send you a link. I can't believe we've been going for 3 hours and still got 22 people. I feel like it's my lucky day. It's got to be that thumbnail. It's by Burton. Any good book recommendations? I recently read a book that kind of rocked my world. I slowed down and listened to it twice. It's called Anti-Fragile. I would highly recommend that. And other than that, I would say, what kind of book are you looking for? So Miriam Robinson, I would recommend, while you're thinking about the book side, I would check out Profit First. Profit First is a book that Will and I have modeled the way that we do our bookkeeping for our properties. I think Profit First has been really helpful to make sure that we don't forget about paying ourselves, because a lot of business owners don't end up paying themselves, taking any profits, or treating themselves in any way. So Profit First kind of chastise business owners for doing that, and then provides like a really good way to keep track of everything, to make sure that you understand where the dollars are going, where they're coming from, and all that. I highly recommend that one. Who Not How is a good one. If you're just getting started and want to if you're just thinking about like a career change, I would recommend the book Relentless. That book fired me up when I first read it. It's a good one. It's one that I think about often when I think about what it takes to be great. Um, The Wealthy Gardener, obviously a good one. The Ultimate Business Tune-Up by Rich Allen. He is my business coach that told me about the 7 streams of deal flow that I referenced earlier. I would highly recommend his book. Ambition is a book by a guy named Seth Bueckley. He's a good friend and mentor of mine as well. And he just talks about most entrepreneurs, just don't have a firm understanding of ambition or gratitude. And he does a really good job at suggesting some safeguards that people with a lot of ambition should put in their life so they don't crash and burn. The 12-week year, that's a really solid book that we base a lot of our, like the Mastermind is based around that. Setting 12-week goals and then taking a week off. The One Thing and Think and Grow Rich, those are really big books. The One Thing, that helps me kind of stay in my wheelhouse. Like we were given an opportunity on a pretty big 65,000 square foot commercial building here in town. And I think it's kind of a layup for us, like the financing side of it. But we have the slightest clue as to how to do anything with that. So even though there's a lot of money potentially, it also could wreck us because we have stayed in our lane with single family homes and we're not down to venture out. So The One Thing, that's a book that I've read no less than 24 times, because one of the things that I have, like as an entrepreneur, is this like shiny object squirrel syndrome, which will for sure kill any momentum that you have going, or any long-term impact that you want to have in one arena. So The One Thing is a book that I read regularly to help stay focused. The Big Leap is another good book, especially I would say Relentless and The Big Leap. If you're contemplating a transition in the near future, those would be fantastic books to help you get your mind right. I recommended The Big Leap to one person right before she took a big leap, and she said that that book changed her life. So that's high praise. And then if you find yourself believing what a lot of people say, I would highly recommend you read a book called Influence by Robert Cialdini. Cialdini. It's called Influence. It's a pretty old book at this point. He is currently, I think he's still a professor at Arizona State. And Influence, and then he made a sequel to that book called Persuasion. And I would highly recommend that you read those books if you think the media is anything, has anything good in it, or marketing. So Influence and Persuasion are all about like the psychology behind having influence or getting people to believe you. And I think it's really powerful and really important to read those books and have a firm understanding at the way that a lot of these big corporations are trying to tap into your psyche, because it's borderline, in my opinion, criminal what some of these people are doing. Can you purchase land only with an FHA loan? I don't know. Will could answer that. I don't see why not, but I also don't know anything about FHA loans. I don't think I've ever used one. Thanks for the link. What's your advice to registering another LLC that's not linked to the first LLC before buying properties? You know, I would be cautious about doing too much on this LLC stuff. I would say for a long time, having one LLC is likely sufficient. I would suggest reaching out to a CPA and getting your CPA and attorney in the same office, going through your personal needs and figuring out what the best legal structure is for you. I would not necessarily recommend that you watch a lot of videos on legal structures, LLCs, why you should have one. And I think, similar to like the no trespassing signs or like private property signs on like these really beat up houses. It's just like, man, what are you like? Who's going to come into your house, looking like that? Like you've got nothing for people to steal. So like the no trespassing signs, the private property signs, on like really beat up homes, you don't see, like, if those signs were of any importance, then why don't you see them on like the really high up signs or high up homes? And I get that all analogies break down to a certain point, but a lot of people I find spend a lot of time thinking and talking about legal structure before they even actually have anything to put inside of these legal structure. And all the legal structure is designed to do is to like protect your assets and liabilities. But if you don't have many assets or liabilities, then why are you spinning your wheels on the legal structure? So I would say when it comes to your first multiple properties, you're going to be fine. I know people that own, hundreds of properties in their personal name, probably not advisable. I know other people that have different LLCs and different land contracts for each individual property they own. And really, it comes down to personal preference and risk tolerance. But, if I were to make broad term generalizations about people, I would say that, having a different land contract or a different LLC for each property, especially on the single family space, is a bit paranoid and a bit much. I would say if you have the proper insurance, then you're likely fine. I would say if you got an accountant, an attorney, and an insurance agent in a room, the attorney is going to try to break up all of your assets into as many of these different structures as possible to mitigate the risk on each one. The insurance agent is going to try and make sure that each of these legal entities has the appropriate amount of insurance proportionate to your net worth. And the CPA is going to try to separate your books enough to keep them all separate and not have any of your funds commingled. Now, at a certain point, it's going to be cost prohibitive to have certain LLCs. Like having one LLC per single family home, way overkill, especially when you factor in the different bookkeeping fees. So having hundreds of properties in your personal name, probably not the best of ideas. Having a separate LLC for each property, probably not the best of ideas. Having one LLC with all your properties, probably not the best idea. It's very, very up to your trusted professionals and what, push come to shove, what do they want to go to court and defend on your behalf. Hi from Dallas, Texas, Ryan. I found your videos the other day. Very informative content. Thanks, Mike Crow. I really appreciate it. That makes me really happy. I'm a huge fan of doing this, by the way. I really love this YouTube channel. Great tax write-offs to anyone who has a home business, airplane tickets and meals as business expenses, printer or computer or scanner. I mean, I guess. You're not wrong. That's for sure. People say that you need multiple sources of income, especially since the virus. Yeah. You should always have multiple sources of income. I would say that if you are currently in a position where your main source of income is your active income, what you get paid for your time, you are in like a code red type situation. Like you need to feverishly work. You need to put in 21-hour days until you have enough to start diversifying your income. That was probably the biggest realization whenever I left law enforcement. It's just like, man, I am never going to have enough, like exchanging my time for money. I'm always going to run out of time first. No, it's just not good. My brain's getting a little fuzzy. Just don't do it. Just don't have time for money be your main shtick. Bad idea. Nate Shipper, welcome, man. I haven't seen you quite on here before, so this is exciting. When moving to a new place, what's the best way to find some other investors to learn from? So Bigger Pockets is a pretty big website. They have like an area of their website where you can look up Bigger Pocket meetings. They're not hosted by Bigger Pockets. They're just put on by other Bigger Pockets members. I would say look there. I would then I would go on to Facebook. I created my Facebook specifically just to participate in the Dayton Real Estate Investors Network. That's it. I didn't have one before. And since I really don't check it unless I'm interested in what's going on there. One of those weird quirks left over from law enforcement. Just really don't want much to do with it. I would just type in like whatever area you're moving to and real estate investors and see what comes up, see where they meet, and go hang out with them. That's actually all I would do. Bigger Pockets, Facebook. That's where people are. That's where people hang out. Hello from Houston, Kimberly Osborne. Welcome to the live stream. I appreciate you being here. Above comments inspired by Marcus and my research on how to support yourself with new business during this difficult period of time. Yeah. All right, Will weighed in. No, you cannot purchase land only with an FHA loan. You can do a new construction build with an FHA loan, but buying standalone land with financing is relatively difficult. From the horse's mouth, do not do it. It cannot be done unless you're building something. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I agree. Do you always rent out your properties after renovating them? I am slow flipping a house in Dallas and was planning to sell next year when done, but your videos have me rethinking the rental option. So Will is my brother and he's my business partner, and he is an absolute wizard at running numbers and making sense of financial problems. And what we have, it all depends on your goals, Mike. But I would say, flipping a house never makes sense in the long run if you can afford to keep the property. So, like selling a property for 100% of the market value versus refinancing the property for 75% of the value. The 75% cash out refinance, whatever proceeds you get, that's tax free because it's debt, it's not actual income. So you're not going to pay taxes on it. And then you're also going to have that residual recurring income from the rent. So long as you have a spread between your operating expenses and the income of the property, then you should likely hold on to it as a rental. If you need a large influx of cash, if it doesn't make sense as a rental, or if you're just not interested in that property anymore, then selling it most certainly makes sense. But one of the things that I kind of alluded to earlier, I don't think I outright said it, but when I first left law enforcement, I sold life insurance, and that's kind of like flipping a house. You get paid a lot of money once, and my personality just doesn't jive with that. And I actually made a vow to myself to never do anything again that only paid me once. So I really want to abstain from doing big ticket one-time items. I am really focused on, I do want massive influxes of cash, but I also want to make sure that everything that I do has residual income attached to it. That way, what I'm pouring my energy into isn't like a hamster wheel where you have to keep on your hand on the wheel, going and going and going in order to see income from it. Because that's how you end up really tired and having to work a lot more years than you probably should. I think the only caveat to that is if you can figure out, the tax problem that, and if you can, let's say, flip in a hot market like wherever you are in Texas is really hot, and then put that money into a more affordable market that's a stronger rental program. Because if you do the 75% cash out, keep the asset, have the cash flow from the rent, you're also tapping into the appreciation, the principal pay down, and the tax benefits for having that property long term. And that's where the magic really happens. What's the Facebook group? So like if you're in Dallas, then I would type in like Dallas Real Estate Investors Group and see where people are meeting up there. And if you're trying to invest in Houston, then I would type in like Houston Real Estate Investors Group. So like if you wanted to invest here in Dayton, I would type in Dayton Real Estate Investors Group or something like that. And then go to wherever those people are. If you're looking to get plugged into like local investors, I think that's a really good idea. What are your thoughts on short-term rentals? That's a great question, Nate. And I don't know. I think we've decided, since Will's listening, he might be shaking his head, and that we haven't yet decided. But I think we're going to try our hand. We just purchased a property not far from a university, and I think we're going to try our hand at doing Airbnb there. Not just because it would make good YouTube content, but I think at this point, because we have a very small staff now, I think we've got the bandwidth to take on some stuff like this. Whereas previously, when I was asked about short-term rentals on this channel, I said no, and that was because my hands were just so full, and the systems that we had weren't set up for short-term rentals, and I didn't have the bandwidth to do anything explorative or try anything new. So now I think we've got enough people that want to help the business make money, and enough things that I think we could take a really good stab at these short-term rental things. And I also just want to give a special thanks to my camera, because we've been going now for 3 hours and 10 minutes, and it hasn't shut off like it did last week, every 30 minutes. So I guess you can figure out how to do things on YouTube. So I watched several videos about how to bypass that automatic shut off, and here it is working. So thank you, Canon. No, I sure don't. I hardly have Facebook. I guess there's this thing now called Facebook Messenger where I get a lot of people. They will, like, when they first reach me, they're like really angry, and they're like, "Man, I've been trying to reach out to you. I've been sending you messages on Facebook." I was like, "I didn't know you could do that." But like, that's not a place you should try and reach me. In Dallas, look up Total Wealth Academy. Probably pretty good. Any advice for a first-time home buyer? I'm really distracted because I read this first line of what Jeff's saying. There are $5 billion worth of commercial real estate in default, 4+ units. We are going to go heavy into this market in 2022. Merry Christmas, my man. I'm so glad I found your channel. I'm happy that you found my channel as well. And thanks for all the insights you've been sharing in the comments. I'm really interested to learn more about your model. And yeah, I think I'm really excited to see what happens, because one of the things that I think is pretty fascinating, and you might appreciate this, Jeff, is, when 2008 happened, you didn't, and I get you're talking about 4+ units, so I'm talking about single families, but I mean, in 2008, you did not have like the BlackRocks. Like, the hedge funds did not yet run large packages of single family homes, or like large portfolios. So it was like the common consensus that you cannot scale a portfolio of single family homes and remain profitable. So a lot of hedge funds steered clear, and you didn't have any large institutional money pouring into the single family home space. So now that BlackRock came out, I think I watched an interview with the CEO from like 2015 or 16 saying, not only can this be done, but we're actually being very profitable, and our strategies are sustainable. So now that BlackRock has kind of proven the concept, you've seen a lot of other groups start buying large portfolios of single family homes. And now I know I could point to a couple of people that have like 12, 14,000 single family homes. So now that we know it can be done on scale, if we ever experience massive single family home defaults again, I'm interested in the impact it's going to have. How far below market do we need to fall until the hedge funds scoop up the inventory available? Just food for thought. These are things that don't have answers. I'm just thinking out loud here. And similar to what you're saying, I mean, I don't want to see anybody default, obviously, but at the same time, I wonder how quickly this stuff is going to scoop up, and at what price point off of market value are you going to be able to pick these things up for? It's going to be really interesting. I'm happy you're on the channel. Any advice for a first-time home buyer trying to purchase a multifamily? House hack, man. I would say that if you're serious about changing your life, if you really want some passive income, and if you're trying to be a first-time home buyer getting a multifamily, I would say The pro move would be not just buying a 4-unit and renting out those other 3 units, but if it's a 2-bed or 3-bed, 1-bath unit, hey, rent out those other two rooms. So you're house hacking your own unit inside of your house hack. I think that's the most pro move that you could do. That's not something that I have done. I accidentally house hacked a home when I was 23. But that was not on purpose, and I did not do that with money in mind. But yeah, that would be the only advice that I have, other than the fact that you're making a really good decision by using your first-time homebuyer program or whatever it is to get into a 1 to 4 unit property. That's a pro move in and of itself. YouTube is a good index of user manuals. I love it. Yeah. It's happening already. Many loan mods are in default. I'm seeing some massive non-performing tapes popping up in Q1. We should chat eventually. Yeah, I agree. My brother and I, we were talking with someone recently, and they have a commercial building. It's like 65,000 square foot. It's about to default in like May or June of next year, but it's out of our wheelhouse. We wouldn't know what to do with it. The lender on it was suggesting that we chop it up, make it some self-storage units, or chop it up, make it a multifamily. But I mean, it's a 65,000 square foot. It's like 3 stories of a building. It might have a basement. I don't know. That's way too much for multifamily. Self-storage, I don't know about all that. It's so far outside of our scope, I wouldn't even know how to think about it. But to your point, I think there's a lot of opportunity on the horizon. However, at the same time, because when I was starting in 2016, 2017, we bought our first property in August of 2017. But because of the amount of content that I was consuming, because I was commuting between North Carolina and Ohio, I was getting, so much windshield time that I was listening to as much as I could. And there's only so many real estate investing books. Other than that, I was listening to podcasts. So I got pretty far back into the podcasts. And when I got started in 2017, since like 2015, people were predicting an impending crash. So, and then like a couple of the Bigger Pockets podcasts that I listened to in like early 2017 was about how this market is surely going to crash soon. And had I heeded that advice and stayed on the sidelines until something crashed, I mean, could you imagine? Like, that's so detrimental. So because of that, even like, I don't know, there are always people out there predicting a crash, usually based on very little. And I would say, even if a crash is impending, that is not a good reason to sit on the sidelines and not do anything. I mean, you've got these large companies. Sure. I mean, don't do anything that loses your shirt. So maybe, research when crashes do happen, who are the people that are horribly impacted and who are the people that make it out okay, and maybe study that. But my biggest piece of advice is don't sit on the sidelines waiting for a crash to happen so that you could only take advantage of great deals whenever that crash does happen, because that's just not realistic. And that's not, in my opinion, how the game's played. But again, an asterisk on that is that I haven't yet lived through any sort of actual market correction. Excuse me, I've lived through them. I haven't been an investor in a market correction yet. All right, let's see here. Got my disclaimer rolling. Post questions in the chat. Anything you might have. We are almost 3.5 hours in. We got 18 people on. Any questions you got, let me know. Other than that, man, it's almost that time where I go check out that property at noon. This is a good day. I tell you what. it's not very. It's not often. Not often we make it this far. Yeah, man. From Zillow flop. Yeah, hedge funds. That's yeah. I think hedge funds are the, if I were to sit here and be very transparent about the things that could kill our business model, but that's the case for anything hedge funds want to be in, right? Hedge funds can single-handedly destroy any like mom and pop run industry, or any people that don't have the same amount of disposable resources or income as the hedge funds do. So if hedge funds came hot and heavy into the Dayton market, it would pretty well cause us to pivot real hard. But again, that's true with anything. How many hard money loans have you used at one time? I don't know how to answer that. Um, so I like to draw a distinction between hard money and private money. Hard money, they charge points. Private money are people that friends and family, that are lending you money secured by first position mortgages. So almost all of our properties that haven't yet been refinanced with a traditional bank have private money loans attached to them. As far as hard money goes, um, I would say we have used hard money to take down a portfolio of 20 properties. That was the biggest transaction that we did with hard money. But since we've done that, we converted over to long-term debt. See you, Mike Crow. I appreciate it. So I guess the biggest hard money loan that we've done was a package of 20 properties. But that was just one hard money loan. That's all I've got. All righty. Well, I am going to go ahead and get off of here so I can make it to the property in time, and take care of a few of these emails that have came in since I started this. So I really appreciate everyone's time. Next Friday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, I will be right here. In the meantime, be sure to tell all your friends about this channel that are interested in real estate investing, and show them how professional you are using your free 7-day trial of PropStream. Oh man, I'm too funny. All righty, I will see you all soon.